Excellences, distingués délégués, chers collègues, Madame et Messieurs, bonjour. I would like to welcome you to the third and final day of the fourth edition of the Future Forum. I hope yesterday you had a lovely night at the dinner. I'm tempted to make you stand, but I'll leave it for some other time. My name is Sambou Diakite from OHRLLS, et j'ai le plaisir d'assurer le rôle de votre maître de cérémonie ce matin. Pour commencer, we'll have a very substantive program for the day, focusing on strengthening the linkages between research, policy skills, and the broader preparations for the midterm review of the Doha Program of Action. Before we begin, I would also like to remind the participants that we shared the evaluation form and would like you to please answer before you leave, as this will help us improve the preparations for the next Future Forum and also the organization of the next edition. With that, I'm pleased to invite the panelists, the moderator, Mia Sepo, Leadership and Development Consultant, who will moderate our first session from Insight to Impact, Bridging Research and Policy in LDCs. I'd also like to invite the panelists for the session. Dr. Abebe Shimeles, Honorary Professor at the University of Cape Town and Senior Economic Advisor to the Minister of Finance of Ethiopia. Mr. Mohamed Akhtar Jamil, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Education of Bangladesh, and Ms. Rebecca Ada Adonto, UN Resident Coordinator in Malawi. Ms. Mia Sepo, please, you have the floor.
So just take the ones. Yeah, and then I'll do you. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Bonjour, hyvää huomenta. Good morgon. Have you noticed the incredible achievement of timeliness of this LDC forum? I tell you what the secret is. You also heard the reference to the high consumption per capita in Finland of coffee. That's why we run on time, because we all want to make sure we get the coffee break. So we have to make sure we do that also today. Some of the previous speakers, being high-level officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, were very cautious about saying anything about why we are the happiest country in the world, right? So I tell you a theory. If you look, and there's researchers in the room, if you look at the countries ranking high on the happiness index and the forest cover in these countries, you might see a correlation. I am a forest person, and I believe that closeness to nature keeps us grounded, keeps us in the context where we are. So I think there is a correlation between forest cover and happiness. I think that is also a good metaphor for the policy-making process and what we will discuss with the distinguished panel. The closer we are to the roots, to the context, to the evidence, to the people's lived realities, the better the outcomes of development policies. And that is what we will examine today. How do we make sure that research informs the policy? How do we make sure we get to that evidence-based policymaking and programming? During my long career with the UN, I have had the honor to serve in a number of countries that kind of fall in the LDC bracket. I have the pleasure of having called Tajikistan, Sierra Leone, Malawi, Bangladesh, Zimbabwe home. That label of LDC often comes with a list of constraints and challenges and the traditional poverty traps of Paul Collier. I think it's important to keep in mind, at least in my lived experience, these are places of incredible resilience, places with a lot of creativity, places with a lot of potential. And I think that's also what we're going to get to in the panel today. It's important to keep in mind that the capacity to do research and to generate that evidence, to have good statistical capacities, is not a privilege of the North. That capacity exists equally in the global North and in the global South. What is different is who sets the research agenda, what research gets funded, and who owns the research fundings, and for what purpose are they being used. And of course, academic freedom matters. Does the independent research have the space to shine a light on the policies, especially on the policies that don't work, and call for and put forward recommendations of correction? So, what I think is absolutely clear, and I'm sure we will hear more of that during the course of the day and from the panel, is that evidence that is grounded in a deep understanding of local context is really what can ensure better outcomes of development. So let's now move to our panel, and I will join you here. So, if I may put the first question to you, Dr. Abebe, and ask for an example, if you have one. And if you don't have one, we are obviously very interested in knowing why, through your distinguished career, do you not have an example? But an example of where research and evidence has actually directly influenced and informed legislation, national strategies, or public programs. Dr. Abebe, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Good morning, everyone. I'm Intia. I'm also a proud resident of Helsinki. So happy guy. Akwaba, those from West Africa. Karibu from East Africa. I may miss the South Africans, even though I live in, also work in Cape Town. Madam Chair, you have said it, you have set the tone, a very, very clear link between quality of research and policy making in the context of low-income countries. I like to call it low-income countries and least developed countries. You have said they are very resilient, including my own country. When we choose to grow, we grow. When we choose to fight, we fight. And people are quite hardworking in environments that allows them to prosper. So I'll give you 2 examples. My career has been focused more on Africa. So I worked for African Development Bank as a researcher, as a research manager and director for a long time. And this is a question they have always been asking me in the board. Why do we fund you? Why do we need you guys? What are you contributing to the continent? Because we are international servants and we do research, so there is this conflict between publishing in good journals and then also advising policy relevant things to the bank, to African governments. So that tension always exists. To me, research is a public good, whether you use it for changing lives or not. But there is also a very fine line between being a practitioner and a researcher. So let me give you 2 examples from my experience. As you know, since 2000, the focus of the international community, the policy entrepreneurs, And knowledgeable people have been reducing poverty in the world. The MDGs, the SDGs, so the UN colleagues know everything about it. So we have been studying poverty, even myself. I did my PhD in Göteborg, Sweden, and worked on Ethiopia's poverty almost all my life. And I don't think I understood it. So in the African Development Bank, we started working about the African middle class. Why do we always write about poor poverty and etc.? We wrote a very simple research work, and it attracted a lot of attention, called the African middle class. Everyone started asking, is there even a middle class in Africa? So we got battered by academics. I've been invited to many places where sometimes I was grilled by knowledgeable people. Where did you get your data? How did you even think of a middle class in Africa? It must be these corrupt officials you are talking about. And then the private sector took up this work, and I was invited in Paris, in Berlin, by entrepreneurs who want to invest in Africa and know about deeply where this middle class exists, how did we compute it, where did we find it, and then they started investing in the continent. If you go to many African countries now, Carrefour, the major retailer, is in Kenya, is in Abidjan, they're everywhere. And of course, in Kenya, for instance, they have big 4 or 5 department stores. You cannot believe you are like in Helsinki or anywhere in the world. Well, I mean, we can argue about this. And then they set up a marketing research unit in Abidjan to look for middle-class dynamics in 40 African countries. This I call impact, in my view. The research was not very high quality. I don't think we published it in a low-level journal. The other one is from my own country. I will just use the 2 minutes. As you know, resource mobilization.
You only have 38 seconds.
Okay, 1 minute. As you know, resource mobilization is very, very critical in African context, particularly tax revenue. Convincing people to pay taxes is a very hard task. So we approached the Minister of Revenue when I was at the African Development Bank. How could we help you? And we thought we could do some administrative data analysis for them. No, they said, look, we want to understand our taxpayers. Can you do something about it? So we did a randomized experiment where we sent out letters to 5,000 businesses in Addis Ababa, just writing one very strict letter saying, from now on, you will be audited next time. And then if you fail to comply, Ethiopian rule is actually very, very harsh. 5 years in prison and then monetary penalties. And for other group, we sent them a very beautiful letter saying, because you have been paying, your country is prospering. It's randomized. You know, it could be, you could be whoever you are. And then the third group received no letter. And then we waited until they filed the taxes. And guess what? 40% increase government revenue for people who received a very strict letter, and about 35% those also who received complimentary letters, and no change actually with the group that received no letter. Actually, they reduced their tax. So that gave us a lot of recommendation to the Ministry of Revenue. Even now, when I go back 2 years later, it has been third-party information is being enforced. Today, revenue mobilization increased like 2-3 percentage points as a share of GDP. So basically, the appetite for good research is there. Let's not blame policymakers. It is the academics who give them minimalist results, like for instance, this behavioral development economics, which I'm part of, is not helping Africans. Let me tell you. It's just, you know, managing poverty. It's not breaking the curse of poverty. That is my last comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abebe, for these very thought-provoking comments in terms of research as a public good, research as a trigger for societal debate. what is the African middle class, and this very practical example of research actually contributing to behavioral change in terms of tax collection. I'm sure there will be questions to you in terms of what you refer to as a minimalistic approach of the researchers themselves. So let's move from a researcher's perspective to a policymaker. Mr. Tavdel Akhter Jamil, you are working for the Ministry of Education in Bangladesh.
Exactly.
So could you share with us the perspective of the government of Bangladesh in terms of what are the constraints and opportunities for research uptake in national planning and informing implementation? And of course, I would assume you would want to focus on the education sector. I know you have a few slides, so if those can be, but you still will have your 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable Moderator, distinguished panelists, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great privilege and honor to speak on the constraints and opportunities for research uptake in national planning and implementation with a special focus on education. Undoubtedly and obviously, Bangladesh fully aligns with the Doha Program of Action, particularly Priority 1, that is investing in people and building capacities to leave no one behind. You know, our Bangladesh first vision and the 2026 reform agenda place research and evidence at the heart of the meritocratic future-ready state. Yet, translating research into policy and impact remains challenging. If the truth to be told, like other LDCs, there are a lot of challenges, there are a lot of barriers, there are a lot of constraints in our country also. But key constraints, among the constraints, I think the first key constraint is the fiscal and structural barriers. You know, we allocate only about 1.7% of GDP to education. That is far below the global benchmark of 6%. Within this limited budget, the share for research is very low, typically 1 to 2%, and this severely restricts rigorous policy-relevant studies. And secondly, there is institutional and administrative silos. Much valuable field research conducted at the local level never reaches central planning cells because of top-down administrative models. And policy inertia is another reality. Legacy systems are vulnerable to short-term political narratives that sometimes override longitudinal data and evidence. And third, an implementation gap exists. Even when successful pilots are identified, the lack of a strong, independent evaluation mechanism, especially in remote areas, makes scaling difficult. And finally, there is curricular resistance persists. But actually, there is also an implementation gap I have already told you. And finally, there is curricular resistance persists. Despite research highlighting changing market demands, our system still leans heavily on rote learning. And these challenges, you know, mirror the broader realities described in today's issue paper, weak data ecosystem, fragmented coordination, and misalignment between research timelines and policy cycles. And despite these constraints, we see clear pathways to turn into insight, into impact. That is restoring foundations through autonomy and neutrality, modernizing our skills for the future, and building digital bridges. You know, we are committed to granting greater institutional autonomy to schools and universities, free from undue political interference. Equally important is administrative neutrality, recruiting educators and civil servants purely on merit, so that the system values and acts on equally or quality evidence. And that then modernizing skills for the future. We are institutionalizing a value-based and work-oriented system. Key initiatives include making TVET compulsory at secondary level with a target of 30% enrollment by 2030, directly responding to self-employment and employability data. We are also expanding third language learning. That may be Arabic, Japanese, Mandarin, and any other languages to boost global competitiveness. And we are establishing also district knowledge hubs to create decentralized feedback feedback loops, rural outcomes, and real-time data will feed directly into national planning databases. We are also exploring how research on labor mobility can be turned into practical programs, including global skills training and digital payment integration for freelancers. These steps are not isolated. They form part of a broader shift toward evidence-informed policymaking that strengthens linkage between researchers, policymakers, parliamentarians, and youth. Excellencies, the journeys from insight to impact requires deliberate institutional reforms, sustained financing, and genuine partnership. Bangladesh is ready to strengthen these linkages and contribute concrete examples to the 2027 midterm review of the Doha Program of Action. We look forward to learning from fellow panelists and development partners on how we can accelerate this transforming together. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. That was the most impressive timekeeping of the day, if not of the whole forum. So kudos to you for this very rich use of 4.5 minutes. Very interesting point about the silos as something standing in the way for drawing these bridges between research and policy making. Also the reflection that the governance culture in a country impacts on how this can be applied. And of course, you're painting the picture of the ongoing efforts in Bangladesh to strengthen these bridges and to look at it from both the foundational skills perspective, renewing skills, bridging the digital divide, and your reference to labor mobility as well. We're now moving to the last panel, Rebecca Adagdonto, who is the UN Resident Coordinator in Malawi. So we've heard from the academician, who's also a bit of a practitioner, I think, from the practitioner, a Bangladesh perspective, and we're now moving to a UN perspective. Rebecca, how do you have examples of how the UN system can support LDC governments or low-income governments, as Dr. Abebe said, in evidence-informed policy making, and either in the field of education or just innovation in general? So if you first look at the UN, and if you then have a very concrete example from Malawi, we would also welcome that. Rebecca, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mia. Mia was my first boss in the UN, so it's such a pleasure to meet her here. So, Excellencies, dear partners and colleagues, greetings from Malawi, the warm heart of Africa. That's how we call Malawi. And let me begin with an African proverb that anchors my message this morning. A river that forgets its source will dry up. In policy making, that evidence is the source. So my focus today, as Mia said, is how the UN system can support LDC governments stay connected to that source, especially in education. And this is really already happening in many LDC countries, including Malawi, but we must do more and we must go further. So I will share a few examples as requested from Malawi to show what can become possible when evidence drives decision-making. I've distilled only 6, and I'll be brief, 6 high-impact practical things that we can do or do more of to make evidence a driving force for transformation, because that's the end goal. The first one is to strengthen national capacities to generate and use evidence. That's foundational. He said that already. And the UN support, for example, in Malawi, has helped to digitize service delivery data and introduce district-level performance tracking. This is making it easier to see who is being left behind and where resources are most needed. In 2025, for example, forcibly displaced persons were included in national service for the first time, advancing inclusive evidence-based policy making. So in education, what this could mean is stronger education management information systems, better learning assessments, and robust M&E units that feed directly into the sector plans and SDG 4 reporting. The second one is bridging research closer to real decisions, what I call bringing the gown closer to the town. Those of you sitting high up in the ivory towers, bringing the gowns closer to the town where the practitioners really are. And here UN can act as a connector, bringing together governments, universities, CSOs, and practitioners to turn evidence into action. In Malawi, gender-responsive budgeting is now embedded across 5 ministries, meaning data directly shapes annual public expenditures. In education, this could take the form of UN-supported policy dialogues or policy hubs where ministries and researchers translate this evidence on learning outcomes or teacher effectiveness into concrete reforms. Number 3, embed learning adaptation into policy making. Systems must learn as they go. And number 4, co-producing, the co-creation aspect, how we come together to develop shared understanding. So co-producing policy-relevant evidence. In Malawi, joint research by the UN, World Bank, and Africa Development Bank has informed government strategies and reforms, including the draft National Economic Recovery Plan. Number 5, link education to broader systems. Education can be on an island. Malawi's school feeding program is a perfect example. It reaches more than 837,000 learners and links agriculture, policy, nutrition, and education outcomes. So for LDCs, the message here is clear. Education policy must be informed by data from nutrition, social protection, labor markets, and beyond. Number 6, strengthen platforms for evidence to policy dialogues. Fragmentation remains a major challenge. Evidence generated in one part of the system often doesn't reach other parts. In UN, in Malawi, the UN is supporting government-led donor coordination to improve on this. So the Malawi experience tells us that UN system adds the most value when it supports systems, institutions, and partnerships that embed evidence into everyday policy making. When evidence is timely, integrated, and actionable, it transforms outcomes in classrooms. And the priority going forward is clear. Education policy in LDCs must be consistently driven by evidence, evidence that informs planning, budgeting, and implementation every single day. For when spider webs unite, they can tie up the lion. Another African proverb for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, of these very concrete examples of what the UN does. And I think talking with concreteness to how the UN is serving as a capacity builder, a connector, a facilitator of innovation, of an capacity to break the silos and ensure multi-sectoral approaches is obviously a very useful story and message to all of us as we are in this wave of UN reform as well. So, distinguished participants, there was supposed to be a 4th participant, which is a very prominent member of parliament of Finland, but she couldn't make it. So I just prompt you a little bit to possibly think in your questions to the panel or in your comments on the subject. On one, remember the Captivate session yesterday, the TED Talks about research. So one question where probably our member of parliament would have been very well placed to speak is to reflect on how do we turn research into a piece of communication that has traction with politicians or which has traction with members of parliament in their legislative work, or that has traction outside of the bubble of researchers. So that's one thing that kind of is part of the conversation. How do we communicate research? And the second point is there's also development partners in the room. Development partners obviously are part of the Doha Program of Action. So what should support look like in terms of funding, agenda setting, data utilization? And how do we ensure that that well-meaning support from external partners doesn't create parallel systems, but very much strengthens the research, the statistical capacities in the country, in that context, at the source, as Rebecca was saying. So with that, distinguished participants, I would assume there's somebody who's going to bring you the mic. Yes, there is. Excellent. And I hope we have some questions to our distinguished panel or some comments on the topic. I know it's early in the morning. I know you were offered coffee, so there's no excuse. We need some questions and comments. Please. Yes. Togo. Togo, please, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup pour les panélistes. Merci pour la présentation. Bon, le temps qu'ils mettent les casques. Donc, je disais merci pour les communications. Et ce qui m'intéresse ici, c'est le lien entre la recherche et les politiques peut-être économiques dans les pays les moins avancés. En matière de recherche, nous avons souvent un problème chez nous. C'est qu'on n'a pas les moyens pour faire les enquêtes sur le terrain. Donc, nous utilisons souvent les données secondaires qui sont fournies par peut-être la Banque mondiale et ses consorts. Donc, on arrive à formuler des solutions aux problèmes. Mais est-ce que ce sont les vraies solutions? Parce qu'un travail n'a pas été fait sur le terrain pour avoir les données primaires et être en contact vraiment des difficultés sur le terrain. Et ça, la question qui se pose, est-ce que les politiciens ont confiance aux politiques que nous proposons pour sortir des problèmes qui se trouvent sur nos territoires? C'est ça la réalité. Donc le système des Nations Unies peut-être peut mettre un fonds à la disposition des États, des universités pour les recherches sur le terrain et non continuer pas à utiliser les données secondaires qui sont fournies par d'autres institutions. Ces données où on ne sait pas si c'est vrai ou c'est pas vrai, mais on les utilise pour faire des simulations. Et bon, ça fait qu'on n'est pas sûr que les problèmes qui sont posés sont les réels problèmes sur le terrain. Donc, on doit, dans le cadre du partenariat ou de la coopération, pouvoir mettre à disposition des fonds pour que les chercheurs puissent aller sur le terrain et toucher du doigt les vrais problèmes qui existent dans nos pays. Je vous remercie.
I thank Togo for that excellent question. We'll take a few questions and then we'll get back to the panel. Do we have? Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair and distinguished panelists. The presentations were very insightful. First and foremost, I think reflecting on the question we have been asked, which was supposed to come from the fifth panelist, I feel that translating research findings into adaptable policy implementation elements would require building an ecosystem in the research field where there are generators of research, but you also have established interpreters of the research into infographics or simpler pieces or knowledge products, which can be presented, for instance, to cabinet ministers, parliament, for them to easily understand the findings and make decisions that would have impact on society. We had in Zambia a body that would pick up research products and translate them or simplify them into infographics and present them to Parliament for engagement, so that those recommendations from research would be easily understood and context as set into where these recommendations are coming from. So I thought I could contribute in that question. Secondly, I have a question from the distinguished panelists from Bangladesh. I think in one of the slides, in the modernization of the education system or skills, as part of the modernization, I saw something about a work-oriented system. I wanted him to just shed more light on why they are promoting a work-oriented system other than an entrepreneurship-oriented system, because that is what's going to be more responsive to the current situation that we are facing. I know Bangladesh has quite a large population, and I don't think the labor market can respond agilely to the needs of the population or the growing population. So I thought, I wonder why they are focusing on work-based approach instead of entrepreneurship-based approach. I thought that could help to clarify. You could help to clarify that.
Thank you very much. And we have a third, last question. I can't see. Rita, this is Burkina Faso. You have the floor, please.
OK, merci bien. Merci également aux panélistes. J'ai juste une toute petite question. J'aimerais avoir l'avis de nos panélistes sur comment les PMA peuvent rendre les politiques plus agiles et plus adaptables face à l'évolution rapide de la technologie et du marché du travail. Merci.
Okay, let's start with these three questions, and then we'll do a second round because we have time for that. I'm going to start with the panel from Rebecca to Dr. Abebe to Bangladesh, and there was a specific question to Bangladesh in terms of work-oriented systems, in terms of skills. So Rebecca, would you like to start and possibly also speak to the very relevant point in terms of producing knowledge products and big data, something the UN, of course, is working on? You have the floor.
Thank you. So thank you to the friend from Togo. I think it's a very important question. And for us in the UN, ownership of research and that journey of translating it to policy and to implementation is very key for us. And that was the point I made around co-creation. And I'm going to give you an example. Before elections in Malawi last year, Malawi had general elections in September last year. And before election, I mean, there was general consensus among all stakeholders that the economy was struggling. There were a lot of issues. And what the UN did was to convene, using its connector rule, to convene the African Development Bank, World Bank, and local think tanks to brainstorm on what we could do. And that led to the research. So putting together local ownership, because the local think tanks were part of that process, with the UN in country, came out with no time to waste. You can just Google it. That was the result. And I'm saying national ownership because until you have a shared understanding of all the key actors in the country, and that is why for the UN and with our partners, as we do engage, we really, really anchor initiatives, programs around co-creation and national ownership. So I just want to agree with you and to say that, and in many countries, I don't speak for only Malawi, in many UN country teams, that focus is getting stronger and stronger to enable national ownership, co-creation, and shared understanding of what even the purpose of the research is and how we engage. So after that policy document, we engaged the Minister of Finance directly before we even started to brainstorm around the focus, the purpose. Surprisingly, a new minister was appointed after the elections because the opposition won. And we are happy to say that they have taken it on board and it has informed the National Economic Recovery Plan. And I guess that is an indicator of national ownership because it has moved from one administration to the other.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. Dr. Abebe.
Okay, very quickly. I don't think I have any question from the audience, but to reflect just briefly how to communicate research findings to decision makers. I think I go beyond just preparing policy briefs. It's important governments themselves invest in the capacity to learn. I think that is super critical. Otherwise, whatever policy brief, infographics you write, if you don't have second-tier skilled community of experts, then it's pointless. In the Ministry of Finance, in the central bank, in key, we call them critical economic agencies. In Africa, they have to invest a lot, and some countries have done extremely very well, like Kenya, I know very well, for instance, there. My own country is trying to do similar. But generally, we don't have this type of critical investment in institutions. On from the colleague from Togo, I think he asked a very, very interesting question. How do we invest in data to provide the necessary evidence by the people who know the local context? I think high-quality research often comes with a cost. And that cost, as you know, sometimes is borne by development partners in frontier economies. And usually they finance high-end universities who do experiments that mean usually less interesting to the decision makers to answer their core problems. So I think this is a very good question. I don't know the answer, but the role of AI in the future, I think this is our own problem. I can only speculate. In my personal view, it's a good thing we have AI. I think it's a very disruptive technology. It's helping me, at least in sharpening some of the things, but it's a very, very threatening thing also. You know, we could be out of job, most of us, if the AI's capacity is coming to the full force. So the question is, how do we adapt instead of go against it? Let's use opportunity to work with the AI disruptions. Thank you.
And Bangladesh.
Yeah, thank you very much. Prudence Kaoma from Zambia for the fantastic and thought-provoking questions, actually. You know, we are establishing a technical training center in Bangladesh. And we have also some training center that we're going to modernizing. To provide actually different types of training for the people, especially for the youths, so that they can trained up, they can be self-employed, and they can be the good entrepreneur. That is the ultimate result for establishing these technical training centers. So I think from getting the train, they can be self-employed. Thank you.
Thank you to the panel. We have time for one more round of questions, and I have the three questions. Eek. Now we have 4. Now we have 5, so that's a problem. The coffee is gonna. I just wanted to tell the colleague from Burkina Faso in terms of looking at the impact of digitalization and AI on the world of work. I would refer you to ILO research piece, which is looking at how are jobs impacted by these massive changes in the world of work in terms of augmentation of job, but also where you have the greatest risks of jobs actually becoming redundant. And the recognition that many of those jobs tends to be in female sectors dominated by females, which is then something that really needs to be taken into account in labor market projections and reskilling programs as well. But we can talk during the coffee break. There is a very good ILO research paper on this. So we have Liberia, we have Bangladesh, we have Guinea-Bissau and DRC. So we're going to take these 4 questions, and I think, let's see, if you can be very brief in the question, then you also give time for more colleagues to ask questions. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm wearing both hats as a policymaker and also as a lecturer. Often at time, we from academics, we assume that theory is practice. So in theory, we believe what we teach can be applied as they are taught in theory. But when you get on the policy making side, you come to realize that practice is completely different from theory. So I like what the UNRC said. Research can only be used to inform policy decision when it is timely and actionable. Most research are done because professors or researchers want to tick the boxes. But research that is occasioned by a government that wants to solve a particular problem, has identified challenges and invite researchers to research on that, I'm sure that will be used to inform policy decision. But my question to the UNRC is that how can a research be actionable?
Thank you, Liberia. Bangladesh?
Thank you, moderator, for your strong time-giving policy. Actually, low standard of research in the LDCs is a great hindrance in the way of significantly incorporating research findings into government policy. My question, especially to Dr. Abibi Simles, how Ethiopia is negotiating evidence-based policy making? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Guinea-Bissau?
Thank you. Good morning. As a former UN staff and actually government staff, I know a little the problems in one side and the other side. But I would like to ask for the panel, although you are not the donors, but I know that the major problem is the financing, everything. So given the persistent gap between research findings and the real needs expressed by the communities in the LDCs, what commitments can donors make to ensure their investment prioritize locally driven solutions and genuinely strengthen the national ownership? This is my question. Thank you. How can we convince them? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's still, I think, Cambodia. Yes, if we take one more question, and there was somebody. Rwanda, yes, that's the last two. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, moderators, and thank you, honorable panelists. Yes, I have three particular questions, two addressed to Mr. Tarafda, yeah, as a policy makers and also policy developer as well. So before I start my question, yes, let me introduce myself. My name is Sokha. I also from Cambodia, and I also working as the policies development as well because I am the policy director. Yes, I do understand that doing research it's really important, and to develop a policy we cannot went through without doing research as an evidence-based policy. But there are several challenges to pick up the best result from the finding of our research to translate it into policy option. That is really challenges. I have two questions to Mr. Taraf. The first question, for your side, to develop a policy, did you conduct the research? And if you conduct the research, in what state? And how do you translate the finding from the research you did into your the policy option? That's one thing. And second thing, being as a policy implementers, we also to ensure that the policy have been implemented in the right track. So what kind of study shall be conducted to ensure the policy implemented very well? That's second question. My third question is asked to Dr. Abe, yeah, in terms of researchers. Yeah. Select the topic to conduct is also important, and also I myself is really challenges because like developing policy and reviewing policy and revise policy, so on and so forth. It's a really challenge. But the question normally, what I did, it's like something like a research ad hoc while we got the demand from our leader. Yeah, Department of Policy should do this, should do that, something like that. Mm-hmm. So sometime we got the complaint from our leader that the topic that you are conducting, it is not relevant and it does not respond to the policy needed. That's really challenging. So my question to you, in terms as a researchers, to select the best topic which relevant to the demand of the leaders and the policy, what kind of suggestion that you suggest us to take into account before we select the topic? That's my question, and also the question from my colleague. She asked me to read for her. How is the research community using technology, including AI, to speed up the process of collecting data and analyzing this data to speed up the process of achieving research results faster? Policymaker want quick answer to policy's question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Rwanda, you get the last question, and if you can be very summarizing.
Thank you. My question is about, maybe I may address it to Dr. Abebe. It's about now, how do we categorize the researchers and how do we put focus on some of the categories of research? Because there is like tendency of looking at research as a whole, yet there are some types that would be like, as someone said it, some researchers are conducted just for getting academic grades, but to be frank, there is no expectation of having direct results in real life. But other researchers are leading to changing life solutions. Then I'm wondering whether in any framework there is a mechanism of categorizing those researchers, then policymakers may choose where to put much focus, like investment and whatever. Second is now how we link research with commercialization of research finding. Maybe someone may tell us about these issues of patents and whatever. You will find many people are conducting researches that are innovative, that can lead to some solutions of life, but you find maybe they don't know where to go for having a patent. Someone will say, this is... we may also look at some kind of researchable ideas from people who are not researchers, but that would really be converted into real research that can change life. So I think you understand what I'm looking at. You can orient us on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all participants for excellent questions. We're going back to the core of who sets the research agenda and who benefits. How do we ensure that the research is timely? How do we ensure that it is actionable? How do we convince those who fund research to really align with what is locally the most relevant research question in terms of really making a difference in people's lives where people are, not in capitals, nor in capitals far away. So this is very well for the last time the panel gets to speak. So if you can very briefly address the question specifically to you, and if you have a final message on to this bigger question in the room of how do we make sure research serves the people on the ground. We start with Bangladesh.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, the representative of Cambodia, for your excellent question. Actually, you know, we have already established a knowledge hub. Their researcher or academician can share their ideas, and from their ideas, the policymaker uptake the ideas in national planning and implementation in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Abebe?
Yeah, very briefly, I think these are excellent questions. I'm sure we, as they say in Africa, we can talk about it until the cows come home. It's very broad, very complex, and my limited experience also doesn't really answer everything you have said. But the question from colleague Liberia, Cambodia, and Rwanda is more or less similar. And actually, you have answered it, exactly. Researchers take time to complete, for instance, the research for credibility. I know sometimes it could take 10 years for a paper to be published in a good journal. I've seen that. So you're right, the policymakers don't have 10 years. They want answers now. They have questions now. So how do we reconcile this urgency with high quality and credible and also actionable policy? That's the ideal, if it can be done. So my answer is just to go back to my little experience and show you one for instance, a very simple example from Rwanda. I was in your country. I had the privilege to work with the Ministry of, with the World Bank, helping the Ministry of Finance. And one issue donors at the time had was community-based insurance scheme in Rwanda is now one of the largest informal health insurance systems that covers almost now 86 to, I don't know, today it's more than 90%, almost everybody. So the donors were supporting, but they had a question about equity because everybody pays the same amount. So which means the rich, that is like a no-brainer. If you are relatively richer, you get access at a better rate, etc., etc. And we did the work, we showed it, and the government changed the rules for, you know, and it took very, very quick things. So this demand-driven research and the supply of it, it's up to us, the community, researchers, experts, and decision makers, to work together instead of haggling each other.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Yes, so
Briefly.
to build on what he said, and that is where the UN comes in. That connector between the researchers, the policy makers, the decision makers is very important. We need to be very clear from outset what the roadmap is from the ground sitting there to the town where the action takes place. But none of this can work or will be possible without predictable multi-year financing for data systems, for all the things that we have been talking about. And this is where we have to start focusing on domestic resource mobilization, on looking internally what we can get, but the UN and other partners are also available to support. And the UN stands ready to play that convening connector role, be the bridge for all of these things. Because without predictable financing, all of these things will come to naught. Thank you.
Thank you. I have three very strong takeaways that I've heard from the panel and from the very pertinent questions from the audience. The first one is that the most powerful insights is always closest to the context. So in other words, the local research ecosystems need to be strengthened, and that's required also to have that local ownership that you have all spoken about. Second is that bridging research and policy is not only a technical question, it is a political question. It is about who defines the incentives, who defines the funding, what is the governance systems, and what is the level of trust. And the third, and that's also to my colleagues from OHLRS, is that the Doha Program of Action ambition is of course not only about the LDCs as consumers of global evidence, but it's a two-way street. So the LDCs are also producers of knowledge that need to inform the global discourse, where of course the UN is a very good bridge and connector. So with that, I want to thank the panel, and I want to thank all of you for your very active participation. Thank you.
Oh, nice.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mia Sepo and the panelists. I guess we all agree on the importance of strengthening research and policy making for evidence-based development pathways in LDCs. With that, we'll break for coffee, and please let us reconvene at 10:30 sharp. Thank you very much. Distinguished delegates, welcome back. We now move to our next section, focusing on technical and vocational education and training systems and their roles in preparing young people for employment in rapidly evolving labor markets shaped by digitalization and technological transformation. This roundtable will explore practical approaches to making TVET systems more responsive, inclusive, and future-ready, while strengthening pathways from education to work. With that, I'd like to introduce and invite the moderator for the session, Mr. Mattia Oliveri, Program Specialist for UNESCO. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here during this very interesting session. I will just, don't hesitate and call my co-panelist speakers to the podium. So, Mr. Boren Chakroun from UNESCO, Sam Jones from Hunuwider. There will be the two keynote speakers of the session. You can sit there, Boren. Sam. Mr. Jussi Inkanen, here. Sorry for the mispronunciation. I will sit here, so you can sit here. From Fuso. Then we will have Lilian Uwaze from Bright, Uganda. Welcome, Lilian. You can sit here. Thank you very much. Nishan Anurag from the World Intellectual Property Office. Please. Lilian, you can sit here. Nishant. And then, last but not least, Mervi Jansson from Omnia. Thank you very much to all the speakers, and good morning once again to all of you, and thank you very much for attending this session dedicated to building sustainable TVET systems in an age of disruption. It's a very important section that I have the honor to moderate for you today. I'm Mattia Olivari, I'm a program specialist from UNESCO, the education sector based in Paris, and I'm working specifically on issues related to technical vocational education and training, which is one of the subsectors of the education system which is at the core of the work of UNESCO. And before giving you a little bit of a framing of the discussion, I would like to thank a lot UNO Wider, the government of Finland, and all the partners and stakeholders involved in the organization of this very important forum that already had very excellent discussion over the last days, and I hope it will continue today. Also for giving us the opportunity of speaking about one of these super important topics like TVET. There's a very diverse audience, and I think this is a testimony of the importance of TVET in a way, particularly for LDCs, but also in the global context in general. The idea and the diversity of this audience is also very important because when we talk about TVET, we are not talking about education only anymore. TVET is something that touches upon various other aspects of our lives, societies, economies. It's at the interface between the world of education and the world of work. And therefore, when we talk about TVET, we're also talking about economic transformation, productivity, employment quality, resilience, sustainable development, and other of many of the parameters and keywords that we heard a lot during the last days. Of course, this is also a very important moment to discuss about this, because as we all know and as we've been hearing a lot, we are in a context in which labor markets, societies are changing very fast. We've been hearing about digital transformation with AI, green transformation, green transition, sustainable development, informality, a lot of issues that have been mentioned by different speakers before our panel, also by the public. But I just want to add a pillar that I think is relevant for this discussion, which is the fact that many of the countries that we have been talking with and that we are supporting as UNESCO, but also with my colleagues here from other organizations, we are dealing also with an additional transition nowadays, which is the one of limited resources. And particularly, we are talking about increasingly constrained fiscal conditions and spaces that limit the possibility of investments of countries. Therefore, when we talk about education, skills development, TVET, we need to think also at the impact that these activities that we are analyzing from the supply side will produce on the demand side, on the economy, on the societies. And the idea is that today we are going to try to analyze not only how to produce better TVET systems, which are more, extended, inclusive, but also we look at the other side of the other flip of the coin. We need to have systems that are adaptive, economically relevant, socially inclusive, and financially sustainable. For this reason, we decided to structure the session today by starting with two keynote speakers, Boren Shakrun, Director for the Division of Policies and Lifelong Learning from UNESCO Education Sector, and Sam Jones from UNO Wider, that are going to give us a little bit overview of the importance of TVET and its economic relevance and an experience of how this translates into a country context like the one of Mozambique. And so without further ado, I think we have time for the first keynote speaker, Mr. Boren Shakrun, that's going to speak about the evolving role of TVET system in economic development and the work that we've been doing on that in UNESCO. Boren, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mattia, and very good morning, colleagues. It's my pleasure to join you here today. Thanks also for the organizers and UNO Wider for this opportunity to engage. Before I come to the TVET, I think it's very important to set a bit the scene for where TVET sits in terms of context. And during the last 2 days, we have been discussing a lot about the macroeconomic context, about the challenges, about some of the solutions. And I think that's what we are trying to achieve here today. But maybe few data that should be in a way important for us to consider. 7 out of 10 children at the age of 10 in LDCs are not able to read and understand a simple sentence. More than 262 million needs that are not in education, not in employment, nor in training. 80%, even more in some contexts, of employment is in informal economy. 95% of the economic fabric in LDCs is about SMEs. FDI is declining in most of the LDCs. And the FDI in LDCs is around 2% of the global FDI. And even when there is an FDI, and because we'll be speaking about Mozambique, 80% of the FDI is going to specific infrastructure investment related to the gas liquefier. So it's not about diversifying the economy. So this is where we are sitting. Mattia just mentioned the fiscal problems and fiscal spaces shrinking. developing countries' public debt is around 31 million trillion in 2024. Most of the developing economies are paying interest rates and serving the debts, and their investment in serving the debts is much higher than investment in social sector like education and health. So if we'd like to discuss about TVET, we have to place it within that context. Now, if I zoom into TVET in this context, we have a paradox. From a political point of view, TVET is racing to the top in the LDCs agendas in Doha, in the Summit of the Future, in the African Union Decade for Education, even the European Union strategy, which focuses on skills development. So we have a paradox that TVET is racing from a political point of view to the top. But then when we look at it in terms of the realities, most of the TVET are not relevant, they are expensive, and they are not meeting the needs of economy and societies. Worse, TVET in the public opinion is seen as a second path, and even a path that is not relevant for young people, and from the perspective of parents. It's also seen as not relevant from the employer's perspective. When you look at the surveys from employers, they're always saying that they are not finding the right skills they need for growing their businesses. And last and not least, we have lack of evidence that TVET has better economic returns than other investments. And I'm sure that my colleague from UNU-WIDER will speak about that. So we have this paradox of while politically it is high in the agenda, in reality, when it comes to the response from the economy, from employers, from society, it has less prioritization and less perspective and less appreciation. So do we know what are what works? Yes, and I think we will hear from our colleagues. We know that countries who invested in better labor market analysis are getting better quality TVET, including in LDCs. For example, if I take in Benin, we have an observatory on skills and qualifications. That's the same in countries like Morocco. We know that public-private partnership is a driver for making TVET more pertinent, and we were listening to a colleague from Bangladesh. We have good examples of skills councils and skills partnerships. We know that competency-based, modular, flexible learning pathways are important, and countries like Cote d'Ivoire has been developing competency-based curricula. We know that countries who have a mix of skills, from foundational skills to transversal soft skills to job-specific skills, including growing digital skills, are the ones that have a better and more relevant program. And that's the case, for example, in Kenya. So we know that also investment in entrepreneurship, creating the capacities for young people not only to find ways to job, but also to create their own job, is something that works, and we see that in different countries. We also know that work-based learning and working with in apprenticeship in form of collaboration with the workplace is something that drives better labor market outcomes and better insertion in the labor market, swift transition to the labor market. That's the case, for example, in Ghana or in Rwanda through the PROMOS project. We also know that placing TVET in lifelong learning perspective is very important, and that's not only about skilling young people, it's also about upskilling and reskilling and investing in that approach of recognizing prior learning, investing in different learning forms and models is important. That's the case of Madagascar, where we worked in establishing a qualification system and recognition of prior learning. Last and not least, we know also that when there is an investment and capacities to collaborate with the private sector to find ways to invest in TVET, it works. And we have colleagues from Malawi, and there is a tax on the payroll, and there is a funding that goes to it. Is it sufficient? Obviously not. But there are mechanisms for funding vocational training, and in work we have conducted, we have spotted more than 74 countries that have a training fund that is based on tax on the payroll. So we know what works. But we know that this is not sufficient for 3 reasons. One, that in many cases, these are islands of success that are in a specific sector, in specific areas, and that we need to take them into scale. We know also that the financing is an issue in all countries, that the tax on the payroll is not sufficient given the informal part of the economy. So the returns from that financing is not sufficient. But also we know that data and evidence are lacking regarding the returns, and that investment in data and evidence is very important, that decision-making should not be based on just a political or expectation, public expectation, but also based on evidence, and I'm sure my colleague from WIDER will do. So how we do this, and we add to it the digital transformation, artificial intelligence, what we were discussing earlier, the impact of digital transformation in economies, but sometimes we tend to extrapolate the change in economy like in Finland to an economy like in Senegal. That's not correct. The informal economy is affected differently from the digital transformation, but there is transformation as well. Money transfer, we have a technology that is used increasingly, and we need to take into account the regulation and the innovation potential of AI, but we need to take into account the digital divide. We know that more than 2 billion people are not connected to internet, and that when they are connected to internet, they are connected to low-quality internet, including in schools and vocational training institutions. But we can leverage the potential of technology because we can leapfrog, and some countries like Rwanda has been leapfrog. Let me finish by saying what we are doing in this context. First of all, we have a strategy on technical and vocational education and training that focuses on 3 pillars. One, on economic development, digital green transitions, and responding to the demand from the economic fabric, meaning including informal economy. Second, we need to focus on individuals and support individual their learning pathways. And that means offering different modalities of learning, flexible learning, recognition of prior learning, partial studies, modular micro-credentials, so offering individuals the opportunity to leverage their potential and unleash their potential. And third, vocational training is not only about economy, it's about society. Learners in vocational training have to acquire not only job-specific skills, they have to acquire transversal skills, they have to acquire citizenship skills, and other skills that are required from the society. And we need to focus not only on employment, but also on values, on participation in democratic societies. This is our strategy, and then we are working with government to support policy development, policy reviews, including in many of the LDCs. I mentioned Benin, we are working in Togo, we work as well in Senegal, in Mozambique, and that's the case in point. Last and not least, we have global initiatives. I would like to mention them. First, we have a network of univoc centers, a crisis of multilateralism, and I think the president yesterday mentioned that. But crisis of multilateralism at the political level shouldn't prevent us from working at other levels. And that's what we are trying to do through UNESCO Univoc network, bringing institutions together to share, to peer learn, and to collaborate. And that's very important to take multilateralism at that level. We also have developed a global skills tracker that is trying to understand what is the demand from the labor market and how this translates in terms of skills development. Mozambique is another case. We are covering more than 20 countries in that case. And last and not least, we have an initiative we call the Global Skills Academy that tries to bring partners from the EdTech, from foundations, from different players to support the government in equipping young people with the right skills for employment. We have an example in that in Kenya, where we have started by training teachers and trainers on digital skills, AI skills, employability skills, entrepreneurship skills, and using a cascading approach to train much larger number of teachers and reaching to the last beneficiaries, which are young people, to support facilitating and transition to the labor market. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Boren. I think that was a very powerful framing to discuss, to introduce the next speaker. The idea is really, I think, two important points. One, that TVET cannot be longer only understood through the lens of education delivery. There are many other factors that affect it. And then Boren also said at the end, he mentioned data and evidence. And I think this is the right link to go through our next speaker, which is Sam Jones, Senior Research Fellow at UniWider. He will speak about the work of UniWider, and the focus will be put on the country of Mozambique, where Sam works on a daily basis. And I will give you the floor without further ado. Thank you.
Fantastic. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I believe I have some slides. Hopefully they'll be coming up at some point. Oh, good. I got a nod. Fantastic. So what I want to do now is just to bring a concrete case based on our work in Mozambique. So we, UNU-WIDER, we have a country program based in the Ministry of Planning and Development in Mozambique. And as you can imagine, like many low-income countries, the challenge of jobs and getting youth into good quality employment is significant. So let's just look a little bit at what does that challenge look like. So Mozambique is and remains a very poor country. So, you know, while we talk about least developed countries, there's a huge variation in the conditions and economic capacity of this group. To take an example, the average income in Mozambique is about half of that in Zambia and Tanzania. And despite good progress from the early 90s to 2015, for the last 10 years, growth has been effectively stagnant in the country. Alongside of that, we have a youth bulge. So the demographic pressures have been growing. The country is doubling in population every 20 to 25 years. And that means around 300,000 young people enter the labor market each year. But they enter a labor market that's largely, that hasn't transformed substantially over this period of time. 75% of all workers are found in agriculture, typically low productivity, smallholder agriculture. Less than 10% are in manufacturing or extractives, and the remainder are in services. And like many other economies, what we've seen is people move out of agriculture into services. But these services are not the high productivity digital services that we're talking about in some of our discussions. They are more lower productivity services that are perhaps in the informal sector. So what that means is that the formal jobs are not growing at a pace that's able to absorb the new labor market entrants. Our estimates would be that around 50,000 formal sector jobs are created each year, 50,000, and that compares to 300,000 young people entering the labor market. And the majority of those formal sector jobs are in services, with only a very small number in manufacturing or extractive industries. So how does TVET in this honestly quite challenging context fit in? So the TVET sector has been a long-standing priority in Mozambique for many good reasons, and it's also the largest growing sector in terms of, in relative terms, in the educational system. So it currently has around 256 training establishments, 122,000 students, and about 36,000 graduates. So it's certainly not an insignificant sector, although it's still smaller than the tertiary education sector. However, what we know about the employability of graduates from the TVET sector has been remarkably thin. So as part of our work with the Ministry of Planning and also the Ministry of Labour, we set out to run some of the most, the only data on what happens to TVET graduates when they enter the labour market. Are they getting jobs? What kind of jobs do they get? And we hope that this can inform, well, it is informing a more informed debate around the sector and how it needs to develop. And actually what we have, I just want to share with you very quickly a little bit of that evidence. I also would like to highlight we have a little infographic that's available in the back there talking about the last session about bringing some of these research results to the policymaker. That's something that we think is important. So what we find from the evidence on employability of TVET graduates is around 40% of them find some form of fixed employment after 5 years. So it takes time for them to get into jobs, but still a lot of them do not find high quality employment even after 5 years. While that's better than the average labour market entrant, it might not be meeting the desires and expectations of our young people. Moreover, there's a huge gender gap. As we can see from this graph, around 30% of all young women who are leaving TVET education are still unemployed after 5 years. In terms of the quality of the employment that the TVET graduates obtain, so these are the ones that do find work, an interesting finding is that the best quality work or jobs are in manufacturing, construction, extractive industries. So this is a good sign that those who are receiving training and training in those areas do seem to get better jobs, but as noted before, there's only a very small number of those jobs available. So the remainder, which are about 60% of the jobs, are in these services, but they tend to be quite precarious kinds of jobs with either temporary contracts or, in fact, they work in areas that are unrelated to their education. So, what does this mean looking ahead? TVET sector in Mozambique is growing fast, but we do need better evidence to say what's working in that sector. And I think the disruption here isn't just about AI or automation, although that's important. It's really a stalled structural transformation meeting massive demographic challenges. And I think a challenge for many of us in the room is that will it be services, well, it is services that are actually absorbing the new workers, but is that a pathway that's going to lead to enough good quality jobs for our young people? And as a result, building a sustainable TVET system means designing for continued informality, because that's just a mechanical fact, and some degree of jobs precarity. But what's missing from this debate? And while it would be great to have all the evidence, there is still evidence that needs to be collected. So one is we need more regular labour market information in order to track where jobs are being created and in which sectors. That's critical so that the education system and TVET systems can adapt to the changing demand in the labour market. We also need much more rigorous estimates of the returns to technical and vocational training, as my colleague mentioned. So this means, how does that improve incomes relative to the alternatives? What are the alternatives? Secondary education, so an academic pathway, or just experience in the labour market itself. But there's also public returns to TVET, such as through growth, productivity, and taxation. So that's also another element. We need to do more fiscal cost-benefit analysis to understand how does TVET operate as an investment in the public sector. This is something that we at UNU-WIDER with UNESCO are looking at a collaboration to really address these, both in Mozambique and possibly elsewhere. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sam. I think that these two keynote speeches provided a very good understanding of what is the context we are dealing with. And I think that we had a global perspective with the challenges, the opportunities that we have from Bahrain, then a case study from Mozambique where these challenges and opportunities are put into practice, with some opportunities of cooperation and collaboration going ahead and what we are trying to do together as organizations to address these gaps and create some kind of evidence that we can then leverage in other contexts. Then, after these two keynote speakers, I would like to turn to my dear panelists here. The idea now is to hear from different perspectives coming from each one of you. I would invite each speaker to have like some minutes of presenting their respective area of work, what they are doing. We will hear about perspective from digital labor markets, innovation, intellectual property, employment-driven TVET, as well as the role of partnerships in this context. Each panelist will have a few minutes to discuss about the relative thematic focus, and the idea is really to bring together different perspectives, global and more specific areas of work of each of these organizations. And without further ado, we would like to give the floor to the first panelist, which is Jussi Hinkanen, CEO of Fuzu. Fuzu, as you may know, works at the intersection of digital platforms, skills, career development, and labor market access, including in African context. So I would like to invite you to share a few reflections of your work in developing countries as you see the challenges of helping young people access good jobs in Africa. And it would be very useful to hear your perspective on how professional and vocational education plays a role in that sense. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mattia, and good morning, everybody. As Mattia mentioned, my perspective to this is largely now from the viewpoint of private sector as a digital platform. But to put it in a bit more context, this is not the only viewpoint that I've been having to this context. So, past 20 years, I've been working largely in Africa, Middle East, and India geography. I have been looking at the society from multiple viewpoints, have been advising governments. For example, know very well I'm Dr. Mushanga. I've been working with the Mozambican government as an advisor to a minister there. I have worked with UN, have worked with multinationals, have worked with catalyzing the innovation ecosystem by setting up tech labs and hubs around the world. And then now lastly, the past 12 years, have been then building my own organization called Fuzu, which is an AI-powered talent development and employment platform focusing on emerging markets. We operate in about 15 countries at the moment, and have over the past 10 plus years now supported about 20 million people and thousands of organizations in finding each other. So basically where we sit is this intersection of employability, skills development, labor market intelligence, and then artificial intelligence-powered career guidance and employment systems. We also then operate something what we call Fuzu Atlas, and Fuzu Atlas is then, because we all know that we do not have enough employment opportunities locally, so we're then also connecting then emerging market talent and the global opportunities through remote work. So we have a team of about 400 people working with US and European organizations as we speak. Most or the largest part of the team is in East Africa, but we work pretty extensively across the continent, but also in Latin America, Middle East, and now more in Europe as well. And so our original vision was really about connecting job seekers to employment opportunities locally, to provide them with highly personalized support. So the traditional job market platforms, they typically treat everyone as the same. So what we wanted to start building is something where we would understand who you are. We would understand what you dream about. We understand where you want to be heading with your life, and we would be able then to connect you with both learning and employment opportunities that then match with kind of the direction you want to be taking. And so the whole philosophy behind Fuzu was always around skills and competencies. So we align, we have a competence taxonomy that aligns with that of the EU's skill taxonomy, and that allows us then to be very granular with the way that what does the job market expect from the job seekers? What kind of trends do we see there? What kind of industries, what kind of companies are emerging? And how would that then potentially impact then also what the education system is then producing on the other side, which then of course goes very much hand in hand with what we have already been hearing today. The sad reality is that if we look at still the feedback what we're getting from employers is that the mismatch is still very real. The education systems are not able to build the relevant soft and hard skills and the mindsets for the job seekers. While, as we heard from the first speaker already, we all know what the right solutions already are. So it's up to us here in this room to then figure out what are then the right mechanisms and how do we then build a system that actually then aligns better with the broader ecosystem. Government cannot do it on its own. Private sector definitely can't do it on its own, but we need to be working as equal partners in this setup. Otherwise, it's not going to function. And so one thing that has, of course, always, and now remember, I've been also sitting where many of you sit inside governments. I know that how difficult it is to reform structures inside governments. But one thing what we need to realize that we are seeing now one of the fastest transformations of the job market in human history. And that means then that we need to become much more agile. We need to be able to adapt with the changes around us, which will impact many of the sectors that we're seeing now over the next few years dramatically. And that then means that the speed of change and the speed of how governments are then changing the way that they operate, both here in Finland, but also then emerging markets needs to change quite dramatically. And again, all of us here are basically the ones who can influence this. Maybe a few points still more, so that it doesn't become too abstract. So one of the things what we also do at Fuzu is we build employability platforms and employability solutions. My vision since, excuse me, since the beginning was that the traditional approaches to youth employment, very often they do not work because they are too small and too expensive. And so what we wanted to start building then is how could we then, or imagining that how could we build something that could basically support tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people at very, very low marginal cost. And we have now a few things what we have already been building and launching in East Africa. One of them is with the National Council for Persons with Disabilities in Kenya. So we run the largest persons with disabilities employment platform. We also now work with GIZ when it comes to green jobs and training and connecting youth and the green job opportunities local in Kenya. And now we're just starting then a program with MasterCard Foundation where just to give you a little bit of understanding of the scale, so we are talking about connecting 50,000 young people to training opportunities and employing 10,000 people over the next 24 months. And we are not now talking about $30 million project. We are talking about a project that's significantly less than $1 million. And so this is what the digitalization allows us to do, is that we can have very agile, highly scalable solutions for this space. And then lastly, we are now currently working with UN University, UN wider as well, in analyzing how does artificial intelligence then support SMEs in transforming the way they are acquiring talent. I'm going to be closing in a second, but then I still think that one point is worth mentioning, which was already then mentioned there by the first speaker, but really underscoring it. I think that the perception of the TVET education is still the big thing we need to be working on, and that goes, of course, back then to how do we then provide the data that Sam was talking about, that there is an improved pathway then to employment, pathway to income, but without being able to change the perception, we will not be able then to reform the system as we need. And lastly, we have all the solutions already. So if I look at now back to 20 years when I started this journey, many of the same topics are still being discussed than 20 years ago. So we have the solutions, and now with the power of AI, I'm a big proponent. I'm not that threatened by it, but we have the tools that help us then to radically reform education systems and doing it in culturally sovereign way in the country. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jussi. I think that something that comes out very clear is that, again, the labor market changes very fast, and sometimes even faster than what education system can do to adapt to it. So that's very important to bear in mind, as well as it's very important to bear in mind that, of course, economic transformation affects people in different ways. Particularly across many contexts, vulnerable population, they continue to face significant barriers in accessing training, employment opportunities, certification, stable livelihoods. And this is something that I would like Liliane to talk about. I will give you the floor. If you can, Liliane, which is the founder and executive director of Bright in Uganda. Liliane, I would like you to reflect on the experience of Bright in upskilling and skilling vocational training to support vulnerable population and displaced people, and on the role of this intervention in creating longer-term solutions to forced migration. It would be also interesting to hear your perspective about the work that you're doing on that and what type of policies are needed to turn the promise of vocational education into reality. Liliane, the floor is yours.
Bonsoir à tous. Donc, mesdames et messieurs, je vous invite tous à porter votre casque parce que je vais m'exprimer en français. OK. Merci beaucoup. Premièrement, c'est un honneur pour moi d'être parmi vous et encore merci pour cette belle opportunité qui nous permet d'être ensemble afin de trouver des solutions communes pour la construction d'un monde meilleur. Aujourd'hui, plus de 123 millions de personnes sont déplacées de force dans le monde, environ une personne sur 67. Derrière ces chiffres, il y a des talents qu'on risque de perdre si on n'investit pas en eux. L'expérience de Bright au Cameroun montre que la montée en compétences joue un rôle clé. Former un jeune déplacé ou réfugié, ce n'est pas seulement transmettre une compétence technique, c'est lui redonner dignité, confiance et la possibilité de construire son avenir. Ce qui leur manque, ce n'est pas le courage, mais l'accès à la formation, au numérique, au mentorat, aux outils et au financement. À Bright, nous accompagnons des jeunes déplacés, même des orphelins issus de la communauté locale, par l'éducation, le soutien psychosocial, le mentorat et les compétences pratiques. Avec une formation adaptée, un jeune retrouve confiance, soutient sa famille et contribue à sa communauté. C'est cela une solution durable. Ne pas seulement aider à survivre, mais donner les moyens de devenir acteur du développement. Merci également pour la deuxième question. La formation, à Bright, nous avons une pratique, learning by doing. Et nous avons aussi une méthode qu'on appelle le peer-to-peer learning. Je vais continuer en français. La formation professionnelle seule ne suffit pas. Un certificat qui ne mène ni à un revenu, ni à un emploi, laisse la promesse incomplète. 4 politiques complémentaires sont nécessaires. Premièrement, connecter la formation aux besoins réels du marché pour que les compétences répondent aux demandes des employeurs et de l'économie locale. Deuxièmement, un accompagnement intégré, mentorat, soutien psychosocial, outils numériques, financement, des stages, des liens directs avec des employeurs pour les jeunes déplacés. Le soutien psychosocial est essentiel car beaucoup portent des traumatismes. Vous-même, vous savez ce que c'est quand tu quittes ton pays pour un autre pays. Tu dois te reconstruire. Et parfois, tu as besoin qu'on t'accompagne sur le plan psychosocial parce que si ta santé mentale n'est pas bonne, c'est difficile pour toi de reprendre du courage. Troisièmement, des politiques inclusives qui associent des jeunes femmes. Oui, moi, je crois beaucoup à la femme et à la jeune fille. Parce que je dis toujours que nous, femmes qui sommes même présentes dans cette salle, nous sommes des entrepreneurs, nous sommes des leaders. Nous sommes des grandes dames de demain. Des réfugiés et personnes déplacées, des conceptions de programmes qui connaissent les réalités du terrain. Quatrièmement, de meilleures données sur l'accès, l'achèvement et l'insertion pour prouver l'impact et attirer des financements. À ces conditions, la formation professionnelle mène vraiment à la dignité, à un emploi décent et à une réelle participation dans la société. Tout à l'heure, j'ai partagé un lien que j'aimerais vous présenter, s'il vous plaît. Si on peut faire une petite projection. Je vais m'élever, excusez-moi. En 2024, comme je dis souvent, je crois beaucoup à la force des femmes. J'ai donc, en collaboration avec Migration Summit et sous la tutelle du Massachusetts Institute of Technology, nous avons fondé un programme qui s'appelle Empower What Through Innovation. Nous vivons dans une époque où nous sommes confrontés à des nouvelles technologies et personne ne doit rester derrière. Et c'est important d'être outillé. C'est la raison pour laquelle, s'il vous plaît, est-ce que vous pouvez? C'est la raison pour laquelle, à travers ce programme, nous avons formé 15 femmes réfugiées en entrepreneuriat, en marketing digital et en psychologie des affaires. Vous savez, nous pouvons tous avoir accès à des formations, être diplômés, mais si l'emploi ne vient pas à toi, un certificat seul ne suffit pas. Il faut être entrepreneur. Moi, je dis, la meilleure richesse, c'est d'être son propre patron. C'est la raison pour laquelle aujourd'hui, mesdames et messieurs, je vous invite tous à être des mentors pour tout un chacun. Parce que ce n'est qu'en travaillant ensemble que nous avons le pouvoir de construire une communauté africaine, mondiale, unie et solidaire. Je clôture mon discours sur ce message important de Nelson Mandela, où il disait, "Education is the most weapon that we can use to change the world." Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your audience.
Merci beaucoup Lilian, merci beaucoup pour l'excellente présentation et la perspective que vous avez apportée à la discussion. Thank you very much once again, and I think that's a new lens that has been brought to the discussion, which is about inclusion, dignity, and equality in the way training and education needs to be provided to people, with a very important focus on women, on vulnerable population, displaced people. I think that's very important. When we talk about TVET, we also need to talk about, it's not only about the issue of filling existing jobs. The issue is also about enabling people to create their own jobs, find their way through the labor market in various other ways. And it's also about enabling young people to innovate, create, and particularly protect and commercialize ideas and participate in new forms of entrepreneurship and knowledge-based work. That's why I'm delighted to give the floor to my colleagues from WIPO, Nishant Anurag, which is going to talk about this perspective and the role of WIPO in promoting this. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mattia, and good morning to your excellencies, delegates, and colleagues. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO for short, which is the United Nations Specialized Agency for the Administration of the Global IP System. More specifically, I'll speak from the perspective of the WIPO Academy, which is the training arm of the organization charged with the role to make IP skills and knowledge accessible and actionable to all stakeholders of the global IP system. So this includes not just governments, this includes entrepreneurs, professionals, creators, and matching with today's theme, also young people. And we deliver on this mandate through a broad portfolio of multilingual trainings. This includes over 60 distance learning courses, professional certification programs, master's programs, summer schools, and also broader institutional partnerships. And effectively, through all of this, we are able to reach about 140,000 learners every year around the world. So in that spirit, my intervention today will focus on positioning IP skills and knowledge as a core component of any skills building strategy for youth in the LDCs. And in doing so, I'll also briefly touch upon what the WIPO Academy is already doing to get us in that direction. So in describing TVET as the interface between education systems and the world of work, one must consider that this world of work is no longer simply a market for skills or technical services and so on. It is increasingly becoming a market for intangibles. Intangibles in the sense of ideas, brands, creativity, or even proprietary processes. And this disruption is not merely theoretical or anecdotal. In fact, investment in intangible assets has grown nearly 4 times faster than investment in tangible assets between 2008 and 2024, currently standing at about 4.7 trillion US dollars. And the consequences of this shift are practical and pretty immediate. Think of a trained weaver or a craftsperson who doesn't quite understand the concept of geographical indications or their design rights. They risk foregoing economic value of the work that they produce. Similarly, for like tech and ICT professionals who cannot navigate software licenses or don't understand copyright, they too are in a way not truly prepared for the digital economy that is coming. And this is regardless of how strong their technical skills are. Part of this is that we tend to frame the skills gap in LDCs as a supply problem. You know, too few skilled professionals, too few trainers, or slightly lesser access to training infrastructure. But there is, in fact, a second gap that tends to be overlooked here. And that's the gap between having a skill and knowing how to own, protect, and maximize the value of what that skill produces. So, I mean, you could even consider the evidence on LDC youth themselves. 70% are engaged in self-employment, compared to 50% in developing countries. These are, again, not passive job seekers waiting to be placed in certain roles. These are potential creators, innovators, and entrepreneurs. And this gap has a direct implication on some of the structural challenges, which is quite pertinent in this roundtable today. Think economic informality. A sound engineer who registers their copyright for an original beat, even if it's a 20-second sample, has the potential to transform it from what is a informal creative asset into a verifiable asset, and an asset that can then become the basis for charging royalties, entering licensing agreements, and ergo, building a sustainable livelihood. On issues of productivity, IP provides returns for ideas. It creates incentives for continued innovation, for improving processes, hence directly driving productivity gains that LDC economies need. So in all of this, how is WIPO Academy getting on in equipping the correct people in these LDCs with these IP skills and knowledges? And for that, the Academy, WIPO Academy, brings over 3 decades of experience in delivering IP education in and with LDCs. And since the turn of this decade alone, we've reached about 28,000 learners. Again, these are students, professionals, entrepreneurs, as well as people from the younger generations. But what is perhaps more important for this room than the numbers is the models that we've adopted in trying to reach learners or potential target audiences in LDCs. So our approach to upskilling professionals rests essentially on 3 pillars. That is, and there's also something that builds towards the sustainability of introducing IP training within TVET frameworks. This is to integrate within existing training frameworks. The second would be to catching them early, and the third would be building for scale. So on integration, rather than building parallel systems, the WIPO Academy works within what already exists. We integrate IP content through our catalog of distance learning courses into STEM and technical university curricula for academic credit. We also support post-secondary and technical institutions to embed practical IP competencies within their existing vocational programs. Now, this is a model which we have validated across multiple LDCs and developing country contexts. And what we've gathered from it, that it as such does not require massive investment in infrastructure. But what it does require is a shift in how the curricula itself are framed. The second pillar, like I mentioned, is to catch them early. And this is because skills training programs form professional habits and assumptions that a young person will carry into their careers and livelihoods. And this is precisely why WIPO Academy has increasingly invested upstream, reaching young people, sometimes even before they enter TVET pipelines. And we regularly collaborate, and to do so, we regularly collaborate with ministries of education and other national education stakeholders to advance the integration of not just IP, but also lessons in creativity and innovation within the formal education system. And this is done through teacher training or helping governments adapt their school curricula to do the same. And this, we hope, can build the IP culture pipeline that directly feeds into TVET frameworks and beyond into their work lives. And our approach is also deliberately, like I said, links creativity, IP, and entrepreneurship as an integrated triad to try and enable the youth not just to access jobs in the market, but also create livelihoods and also become employers themselves. And the goal at the end of this is not to have IP compliant graduates. The goal really is to have IP confident professionals. These are young people who can instinctively ask, what is unique about what I do? How do I protect it? And how do I build lasting value from it? And the third pillar in our approach is building for scale. And for that, Vibe Academy relies on further 3 complementary models. The first is something we've heard like over the last 3 days as absolutely key, is the training of trainers. And in our context, is the training of trainers to deliver practical IP content within their own institutional context and their local realities. This in turn creates a multiplier effect where a single trainer can reach potentially thousands of learners downstream. The second model, which is perhaps a step up from the training of trainers, is what we call the IP training institutions or the IPTI model. Here, essentially, the WIPO Academy partners with member states, typically through their IP offices, to help them establish nationally owned IP training centers. For this, WIPO provides limited duration support in terms of methodology, trainer certification, curriculum development, and the national institution, the host institution, in return provides ownership, a network of local experts, and also business continuity. So sustainability, again, like baked into models, baked into our models. And as of now, we have around 29 of these institutions, 3 of which are in LDCs. And over time, they now boast a network of over 750 WIPO-trained instructors who've now been able to reach to more than 500,000 learners in these 29 countries. And finally, the third model when it comes to building for scale would be, again, something which was key point of discussion yesterday, that is digital learning, or how we call it at WIPO, e-learning. And this is something that underpins everything the WIPO Academy does and is the primary enabler behind our programs reaching a global learner base at relatively minimal costs. And as an extension of our support to national institutions, we also offer to help them establish their own digital learning environments or help them directly integrate into ours. Just mindful of time, so while I close, let me close with what I believe has been the deepest point of this conversation. TVET frameworks are being asked to prepare a generation for an economy whose rules and frameworks are being reshaped in real time. The work being done in this room to rise to that challenge is genuinely admirable. But the ambition that drives not merely economic, the ambition that drives all of us here in this room is not merely economic. It is about how young people in LDCs understand themselves as economic actors. There is a profound difference between a young person who sees themselves as a service provider or a worker, someone whose value is measured by the hour, by task, or by wage, and on the other hand, a young person who sees themselves as an owner of something unique, a skill that can be branded, a process that can be protected, or some creative work that can generate royalties. Hence, IP literacy within TVET frameworks can enable that shift. And all of this, again, not by viewing IP as a checklist of rules to follow, but more as a culture shift. More a fundamental change in how young people see their work and their own place in what is becoming increasingly an innovation and a knowledge-based economy. So thank you so much, and Mattia, back to you.
Thank you very much, Nishant. Thank you very much. No, thank you, because I think that what you open up here is that you gave us a reminder that's very important, that skills agenda is also an innovation agenda. It's not only about skills, it's also about innovation, how we protect innovation going ahead. It means preparing young people for work, but it also means preparing them to create value. to solve problems, engage with technology, intellectual property, entrepreneurship. These are all things that I retain from your speech, and I think it's very important. And that brings us to another essential dimension of the TVET debate, which is how to ensure that training systems remain closely connected to employers and labor market demand. It's something that we've been discussing widely, but I would like to invite Mrs. Mervi Jansson, CEO of Omnia Education Partnerships. Omnia brings extensive international experience in what we can say it's an employer-driven TVET, competency-based learning, work-based learning, and public-private partnerships, which is very important for our question that we are asking us today. How can TVET systems adapt to rapid change while remaining practical, demand-driven, and focus on outcomes? Mervi, I would like you to invite to reflect on, indeed, employment-driven TVET and the alignment of trainings with the real labor market demand, flexible and competency-based learnings as a response to rapid change, as well as public-private partnership for scaling sustainable TVET systems, and the importance of moving from trainings to jobs through work-based learning. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mattia. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say that I've been living and breathing TVET for the past approximately 40 years. That gives me different sort of perspectives on the matter. And I'd like to start by asking our audience here, you, how many of you have come through a TVET pathway, studied in TVET? Please raise your hand. Not too many hands. Well, then an honest question. If you have children, or let's imagine you have children, or maybe your children have gone that pathway, would you recommend TVET in your country for your child? Would that be a good choice? Hands up if you would recommend TVET. More hands, very encouraging. I have to say that I've had the pleasure of being a student, a teacher trainer, a manager, a director. Now I'm the CEO of Omnia Education Partnerships, have been for about 10 years, and I'm also the chair of the Vocational Education and Training Quality Assurance Committee of Finland. And in that capacity, and basically for the past 15 years, I have been working quite intensively with a lot of our non-EU country partners. About 20 different ecosystems for education and training, and that's been a fascinating learning journey. Every country is different, but we very much share similar challenges today. If you look at TVET and the labor market, unfortunately, they're often out of sync for the pace of change. That's often due to some of the structures that we very dearly like to carve in stone, which is not good on a system level, and it's definitely not good for being agile and for the public and private sector to work together to ensure that TVET indeed is a pathway you can then wholeheartedly recommend for your child or your neighbor or somebody else you care about. We've tried very hard to make the structures more nimble in Finland. We used to have 341 qualifications. Now it's down to 160. So they're more broad-based, and it's a modular pathway, so it's stackable. It's like beads in a necklace, and everybody's necklace is a little different because what they bring to the table is different. And I think that's a very important point. If TVET and the world of work want to come together and truly add value and create together, the agility and the different blocks for building agility. We used to think of education as a marathon. The goal is somewhere out there. We're all running towards it at a different pace, but it was a marathon. Now, developing education is more like sprints. And it's not just running fast, but it's an obstacle course. So it's more like agility and looking at how to go around and how to even embrace the different obstacles on that development pathway. For TVET, it's really more complicated because we're not just talking about initial education and training, the upper secondary, but for instance, in Finland, over 50% of our vocational learners are adults. So they are upskilling themselves, reskilling themselves. They want to take or need to take a different route. And we need to be able to provide them with tangible solutions and work with companies, work with individuals who are unemployed maybe, to see that there is a pathway to employability and a future. And of course, if we talk about vocational education and training, there are many systems where you need to already have a job or a contract to be able to study. That's fine in countries where there are jobs in abundances, but with the partners we've been working with, that's not the reality or the case. I was very happy to hear about the entrepreneurship side of this, because in Finland, about 50% of our small and medium-sized businesses are actually founded by learners who've come through the TVET track. So vocational education and training needs to very much encourage and give basically what you need to build a business and to build a career. So we cannot train for jobs that do not exist with curricula that is out of date. And that's where we really need to shake the box and see how can we become more agile and have more of a dialogue with the world of work. There are many countries, Finland included, that have high-level sector skills councils. We have great foresight, but still we need that dialogue on a national level, regional level, local level, even provider level. So the world of work and the local employers and the TVET providers need to be close, and they need to be talking on a regular basis. That's the only way to build the trust and to hear with big ears what the world of work wants and needs. And if we look at structures for that, they're often missing, and they're not even required on a national level from licensed institutions. So we have to break the silos of public vocational education and training and the world of work and make that very porous. In Finland, when we are educating our learners in vocational education and training, it is very much hands-on about being the professional or becoming the professional that you need to be. Those of you who visited us on Tuesday saw that very much hands-on. Our students are building huts, building real houses, making furniture, providing services to the public from day one, so that they learn what the world out there needs, and they learn to listen and provide those services and be relevant. Because at the end of the day, competency-based vocational education and training is very much about relevance. So bridging the gap between knowledge, theory, and practice, and applying those skills and that knowledge on a daily basis. And that's often where there is a trust gap between the world of work and the world of education. And again, that's where we need to build the bridges. We need to recognize all learning, and all learning needs to count. So basically, structures like recognition of prior learning and bringing in the informal and non-formal components to learning and being able to formalize them, whether it's micro-credentials, certification, or whatnot, these are all very needed structures in building bridges and ensuring that there are no gaps. For the past couple of years, we've actually been engaged in a lot of research and doing benchmarking on, let's say, global next practice and best practice. And I'd like to share with you some of the, let's say, components that we've brought together under what we call a framework for success. It's based on 3 pillars and 9 dimensions. It's like, having the stars align, that when this happens, we are getting closer to a perfect picture. We will never have a perfect picture because it's like a kaleidoscope. It turns and twists and the picture becomes different. But that's what we need to embrace if we really want to ensure that we have a relevant system, and the world of work and the world of vocational education and training, that they go hand in hand. So basically, looking at the framework, our first pillar is foresight, quality, and system innovation. So basically, that's the sort of overarching necessity that we need in order to build a system which actually makes sense to the world of work. Under that, we have things like governance, legislation, and monitoring of the system. But basically, it's a dialogue. It's not just reporting and inspections, but it's understanding what to be monitored, what is real quality and relevance, and how to have legislation that will then drive that direction. It is about quality assurance, foresight, and innovation. As we've heard, innovation needs to be at the core of vocational education and training. And then basically bridging to the second pillar is the stakeholder co-ownership. So we can have different forms of that, but like I said, it has to happen. And it has to happen on a daily basis, not once a year when a council meets or whatnot. That's way too seldom. So our second pillar is participation and labor market activation. And we have to realize that today our learners will need career guidance throughout their careers. It's not something you just give at an initial phase, but people face so many transitions in their careers and lives today that we need to give them the support within the system. Of course, what is also important is access and inclusion. Because without access and without an inclusive system, we're going to leave people behind, and we can't afford to do that. Our third pillar is learner pathways and progression, which means that we need qualification frameworks, like I said, that are agile and nimble, that are stackable, modular, built with the intention to change. So change is not our enemy. Change is something we embrace together. We need to have recognition of prior learning formalized, and that will then enhance stackable progression within the system. Diverse and flexible learner pathways. That's often something that we talk about, but is it reality? How do we enforce that in terms of legislation, quality assurance, and really allowing learners to cross pathways? In Finland, we've had the interesting situation where a lot of adults, even those with master's degrees and PhDs, want to come to vocational education and training. We have what we call further and specialist vocational qualifications that are actually built and meant for the world of work. Actually, our Ministry of Education is not that happy about adults coming back to vocational, but employers have embraced it because it's very tangible learning, and it's learning that helps you actually fill the gaps in your career. So that's why the world of work and vocational education and training in Finland have had great partnerships. And I think it's an interesting model to look at for upskilling and reskilling. But overall, if just to wrap up, the whole idea is to create a win-win ecosystem on a macro level, on a meso level, and on a micro level, so that everybody belongs and is a part of creating pathways and a solution. Because, you know, we can throw rocks at each other, public and private sector, and blame each other that you're not, you know, partnering with us and you're not doing a good job. But where is that getting us? Definitely not to the future we all need, and basically to what we owe our learners. So thanks, Mattia. Hope that gave some ideas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bervi. I think not only that, I think it's also because I found it very inspiring also with this outlook for the future that you're promising, that you're inviting everybody to look at. I think that we reached the end of the panel in terms of discussions. We would be very happy to have if the public has questions that wants to ask. We are happy to take questions. We may have time for some of them. Let's see, there's one question over there. There's plenty. Okay. Okay. Yes, I saw. There's the gentleman there, Yemen. Sorry if I'm not respecting the order precisely because I'm not seeing. Okay. Okay. Yemen, Madagascar, Congo, Togo. Yes. Okay. Let me. Okay, let's go with Yemen first. And then also there, yes, I don't see the name, the plate. Can you see the name plate?
Okay, yeah. Many thanks to all the speakers for their insightful and valuable presentations. My question is directed to Dr. Samuel Jones. You highlighted the importance of aligning TVET system with rapid evolving labor market needs. In many LDCs, however, there is a growing risk that access to high-quality digital and AI-related technologies training may become concentrated in urban centers or among privileged groups. At the same time, we have seen interesting examples from countries such as India, where young people from remote villages are increasingly able to work remotely for major technology companies all over the world. In your view, what model or policies approach can help ensure that digital transformation of TVET system remains inclusive and accessible to youth in rural, conflict-affected and marginalized communities as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's take also the other 3-4 questions. So there was Madagascar, then Congo DR.
D'accord, merci beaucoup. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Merci pour tous les panélistes.
Juste un petit instant qu'on va pousser les casques. Merci. Merci. Je pense que tout est...
D'accord. Donc, bonjour de Madagascar. Un grand merci pour les panélistes d'aujourd'hui et pour les thèmes très importants, pour toutes les interventions très importantes. Je voudrais faire une réflexion, pas une question, mais plutôt une réflexion, surtout par rapport à l'intervention de Madame Mervy, présidente de WIPO Academy, que je trouve vraiment qui présente une approche holistique en parlant de l'écosystème, puisqu'il y a certaines disparités. Ici, pour les pays avancés, on parle de qualité, alors que dans plusieurs pays, dans le Sud, on lutte encore pour l'accès, on lutte contre les abandons scolaires. Également, ici, on parle de révolution numérique, alors que chez nous, on lutte pour la démocratisation de l'énergie, pour la révolution énergétique. Aussi, comme ici, on parle d'enseignement technique et de formation professionnelle qui doit être aligné au marché du travail, alors que chez nous, on n'a même pas de marché de travail structuré dans la définition du terme, où une grande partie de la population des jeunes travaille dans le secteur agricole qui est loin d'être informel. Donc, ce que je retiens vraiment de cet échange qui est vraiment très riche, c'est ce concept d'approche holistique, de cet écosystème et aussi de l'actualisation, la nécessité d'actualiser les programmes scolaires de TVET, non seulement pour avoir les compétences, mais aussi pour développer... Fire. Oh.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry for the inconvenience. It's because we were too long, so somebody decided to set fire to stop us. No, but unfortunately, we'll get another 10 minutes to at least take some of the questions that were asked on. And for the time being, we got a comment from the lady from Madagascar, the delegate. Thank you very much. We got a question from Yemen. We know that there was Congo. I know. I'm coming. Yes, but we unfortunately we won't be able to do as an in-depth round of answers as we would like, but at least we'll try to touch upon the main things. I would like to go on with Congo, if possible. Après. Il y avait le Congo avant, après je viens de Togo. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Je remercie tous les panélistes. Et ce sujet est très important parce que on voit au niveau de nos pays qu'il y a un problème pour la formation. Mais les autorités ont pris quand même, ils ont quand même décidé de pouvoir donc mettre de l'importance sur la formation professionnelle. Ils ont maintenant scindé l'enseignement, donc qui est l'enseignement normal avec ce qui est technique. Maintenant, il y a 2 ministères différents et il faut même les baccalauréats différemment. Mais le problème réside aux formateurs. Les formateurs étaient formés avec des techniques déjà dépassées. Maintenant, pour communiquer cette formation, et donc c'est leur formation, il y a un problème au niveau technique. Parce que maintenant, à notre pays, il y a beaucoup de sociétés qui s'implantent, mais ils n'ont pas de personnel qualifié pour pouvoir utiliser ces machines. Parce que ceux qui étudient, ils étudient avec des vieilles machines déjà dépassées, qui datent de longtemps. Maintenant, nous sommes dans de nouvelles technologies. Il se fait qu'il y a beaucoup d'écoles techniques qui n'ont pas de matériel approprié, sauf seulement pour les Japonais qui travaillent avec le gouvernement dans les formations de l'IMPP, Institut national de préparation professionnelle. Là, ce sont les Japonais qui viennent avec leur matériel. Là, ils ont des outils. Mais dans les écoles officielles, ils ont des anciennes machines qui sont déjà dépassées. C'est pourquoi je voudrais maintenant, à vous tous qui êtes des panélistes, de comment, parce que nous suivons ce que vous nous communiquez. Nous allons faire les rapports. Maintenant, c'est aux décideurs. Comment ils collaborent avec vous autres? À quel niveau vous collaborez avec ces décideurs pour les aider à pouvoir quand même accéder à tout ce que vous nous communiquez? Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Je pense qu'on va prendre encore... we are going to take another 2 questions. 1, 2. Let's take these 2 questions and then we have to, unfortunately, we have to wrap up. Malawi, please. And Togo, Celia. Okay. These 3 last questions. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mine will just be some comments. Again, I think riding on what the previous speaker said. We are continuously procuring equipments for our technical colleges. But as he has rightly put it, they are becoming obsolete time and again. So I think we'll be able to get responses for that on how we can go about it. Substantively, I think I just want to indicate that in Malawi, we just launched the curriculum review process last week for the TVET sector. So having, I think, participated in the a day before yesterday, I think I was Omnia. You quote Omnia. Yes, I think it was quite something telling to me because we are reviewing our TVET curriculum.
Thank you.
Okay. So just to indicate that, I think we have got, I think, contacts from the CEO Omnia. So I think we'll be able, I think, to get more details. If we need help, I think we can come. More especially on the curriculum framework, because we know that we are not at par. because you are highly industrialized. But at least the curriculum framework, I think we'll be able to learn much from you. So I think from here, I think we'll be able to get more details. Otherwise, thank you for this kind of discussions.
Thank you very much. Togo, please. I'll ask you to be very, very quick on the questions, if possible. Si vous pouvez poser la question très rapidement.
D'accord, merci beaucoup aux panélistes. Je voudrais rapidement m'adresser à Madame Liliane par rapport à votre expérience. J'ai vu que dans le cadre du regroupement des femmes, vous avez bien associé le numérique et la digitalisation, l'intelligence artificielle. Donc, au regard de ça, je voudrais voir quel est le taux de réussite après la formation, quand les femmes se sont installées sur le marché. Quel était le taux de réussite? Parce que quand je prends chez moi, on forme les gens dans l'entrepreneuriat, mais 1000 ouvrent, dans les 6 mois, vous allez voir plus de 500, 600, 700 sont à l'abandon. Donc ça, c'est votre cas. Bon, par rapport au docteur Jones, je voudrais lui faire savoir que les résultats provisoires qu'il a présentés, c'est pratiquement la tendance au niveau des PMA. Donc je voudrais l'encourager à aller au-delà de la Mozambique et faire des approches dans les autres pays PMA et proposer une politique publique pour que ça puisse aider tous les pays PMA à aller de l'avant. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. We have Chad. And then we'll provide a round of answers.
Okay, merci pour la parole donnée. Je voudrais joindre ma voix à celle des autres pour remercier tous les panélistes qui se sont penchés sur un thème d'une importance capitale pour les PMA, dont le Tchad. Je suis vraiment touché par l'intervention de Madame Liliane. Sinon, je voudrais faire quelques commentaires. En termes de commentaires, il faut savoir que nous, le pays comme le Tchad est confronté, comme vous le savez, avec tous les autres PMA, aux réalités de chômage des jeunes issus des formations générales. Et ces jeunes qui sont issus de formations générales sont confrontés à des difficultés qui parfois les poussent à avoir des comportements déviants. Et
Tärkeä tiedote kaikille asiakkaille ja henkilökunnalle. Kiinteistössä syntynyt vaaratilanne on nyt ohi. Noudattakaa henkilökunnan ja viranomaisten ohjeita. Vaaratilanne on päättynyt.
All good, apparently.
Attention, please. The emergency situation is now over. Please stand by for further instructions. All clear.
We just gained...
Viktigt meddelande. Faran är över. Vi ber er att följa vidare instruktioner. Faran över.
We just gained 45 seconds.
Je peux commencer?
Oui, bien sûr.
Ok, j'ai dit, je joins ma voix aux autres pour saluer les panélistes qui sont penchés sur un thème d'une importance capitale pour les pays les moins avancés, dont le Tchad. Et je suis particulièrement intéressé par l'intervention de Madame Liliane, qui m'a vraiment touché. Et ce qui me pousse également à faire un certain commentaire, surtout, comment faire pour donner une formation qui permet à ces jeunes qui sont issus de formation générale d'avoir un emploi. Ça, c'est vraiment la grande question. Nous devons orienter vraiment la réflexion dans ce sens pour que ces jeunes issus d'une formation générale qui ne les prédisposent pas à une formation, à un emploi, puissent avoir cet emploi. Et ça nous aide vraiment à les sortir de cette ornière, parce que généralement, lorsqu'on n'a pas d'emploi, lorsqu'on a fait des formations, lorsqu'on a des diplômes et qu'on n'a pas d'emploi, on est porté à faire des choses qui sont en marge de la société. Donc, comment faire pour que ces jeunes-là ne puissent pas vraiment tomber dans les bras? Vous voyez, maintenant, nous sommes dans un monde où beaucoup de choses peuvent influencer les jeunes, et si jamais ils n'ont pas un emploi qui puisse les stabiliser, ils peuvent facilement s'orienter dans de mauvaises choses. Donc, si nous arrivons à régler cette question, nous aurons aidé ces jeunes qui constituent des bombes à retardement à être des vrais acteurs de développement. Donc, c'est le commentaire que je voudrais faire par rapport à cette formation et à ces thèmes, et je suis vraiment intéressé par le débat. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. So I think we got all of the questions. I took note. I know that Sam, you have a couple of answers to provide. Liliane, vous aurez aussi un commentaire à faire peut-être sur la dernière intervention. Et other questions were, I think, Omnia. Okay. And then, Boren, maybe you can take the one Togo, how we work with the countries. Okay. Let's start with, I think, Sam, you were the first one.
I'm not sure. Is this working?
Now, yes, I think.
Hello? Okay, great. So the question... It was working, sorry. The question with regard to digital transformation, I think it's very interesting. The delegate from Yemen mentioned quite rightly that there is potential application of digital TVET education towards jobs all across the world, not necessarily in their location. I think that is in principle true and is worthwhile bearing in mind. However, there are a number of challenges that must be kind of considered. One is, are there sufficient conditions to support that in terms of internet access and the cost of access that can be difficult in some countries? Secondly, do they have the required foundational skills? I think there's TVET cannot necessarily substitute for poor literacy and numeracy. And unfortunately, if the basic education system isn't of sufficient quality, then it's very difficult for that to be resolved by the TVET system per se. And I think thirdly, the big challenge as well is that many of those remote working digital jobs are potentially at risk from displacement by AI. We're talking call center work and stuff like that. So I think there are, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it's extremely challenging. Perhaps Jussi and others would like to comment. Can I just make one comment? I know there's very little time, but I think it's also very important to distinguish between two challenges with respect to why TVET graduates might not be getting jobs. One is because it's the wrong kind of training, or there's difficulties in finding the jobs that exist. That's relevant, but there's also another broader issue is that those jobs there's just not enough jobs being created in the economy. And that's not something that the TVET system can solve. And I think for many countries, we need to be aware that resolving the macroeconomic conditions and creating drivers of growth throughout the economy is going to be a fundamental part. They need to go together, but we can't just assume that one side works without the other. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Sam. And I will pass the floor quickly to Boren, the question on how we cooperate with countries to provide recommendations that was made by the colleague from Congo.
I will speak in French because I think the questions were in French and to respect also the diversity of the languages. Je voudrais tout d'abord partir du point que Samuel vient de faire, c'est que s'il n'y a pas une politique de développement macroéconomique claire sur quels sont les enjeux de développement, quels sont les secteurs qui vont croître et qui vont créer de l'emploi, la formation professionnelle ne peut pas créer de l'emploi. Il faut l'inscrire dans une politique macroéconomique, dans une vision de la société et de l'économie, des besoins en qualification en général. Donc je pense que ça c'est le point que, en termes de conseils que nous apportons aux pays membres, c'est de dire qu'il faut partir de cette vision du développement, et un développement durable qui est important, un développement juste, inclusif et une transition juste et inclusive. Donc je pense que ça c'est un premier point. Le deuxième point, c'est d'avoir des stratégies éducatives qui sont cohérentes. La question que je posais tout à l'heure, si les jeunes, les enfants n'acquièrent pas les compétences de base, ils ne seront pas capables d'acquérir les compétences de formation pour l'emploi. Donc, il faut avoir une stratégie éducative qui est cohérente, qui combine le développement de l'école de base, des compétences fondamentales, avec la formation professionnelle et l'enseignement technique. La question de la gouvernance est aussi un point important, vous l'avez mentionné, il faut donner une importance à l'enseignement technique et la formation professionnelle dans le secteur éducatif. Parfois, ce n'est pas le cas puisque c'est considéré comme un sous-secteur qui est marginalisé. Donc, cette place politique à l'enseignement technique et la formation professionnelle est un élément important. Et nous, au niveau international,
nous agissons pour que le financement de l'éducation, y compris de la formation professionnelle, soit une priorité au niveau des pays. L'accord de Incheon en 2015 insistait sur l'importance d'investir entre 4 à 6% du produit intérieur brut ou de 15 à 20% des dépenses publiques. Or, aujourd'hui, on a à peu près 40% des pays membres qui investissent dans ce secteur. Donc il faut agir au niveau des politiques, c'est ce que nous essayons de faire. Le dernier point, je termine. Si on veut résoudre, c'est un peu par rapport aux collègues du chat, si on veut résoudre le problème des jeunes, il faut faire feu de tout bois, comme on dit en français. Ça veut dire que la formation professionnelle n'est pas uniquement l'enseignement technique secondaire. C'est aussi la formation sur du développement rural. C'est aussi la formation par apprentissage. C'est aussi la formation numérique. Donc, il faut regarder l'enseignement technique, la formation professionnelle, non pas comme uniquement une filière, mais comme un système de développement des compétences. Et c'est là où on peut réussir, l'enjeu du chômage et du développement des compétences des jeunes.
Merci beaucoup, Boren. Je pense que là, we have to finish the session, unfortunately, but I invite you to share a round of applause to the panel because it's been very engaging, and to have questions during the sections, the coffee breaks and stuff. Unfortunately, we don't have more time than that. Thank you very much once again, and thank you for the panelists and the speakers. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliveri. I would like to call upon the panelists and the moderator, Mr. Lash. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Lash. You have the floor.
So let's wait for Tina, and please come all up right now. Just take any seat. So good morning, colleagues. I wasn't sure if I can still say good morning, but since in New York we call everything before 1 p.m. morning sessions, I think it's still appropriate to say good morning. So welcome to this final session, final substantive session of the day before the closing. And Mia mentioned in her session before that it's hard to stand between the audience and the coffee break, and now it's actually the lunch, even harder for me. But I will try to push us through here as we lost a little bit of time through this little fire alarm earlier. So the Doha Program of Action has 309 paragraphs. And its final stretch, paragraphs 289 to 309, is all about implementation, follow-up, and monitoring. Sorry for this analogy that comes now, but I prepared those notes on the plane. But if the DPOA were a movie, this last section would be the final act and the moment when the music builds, when the tension peaks and the loose ends hopefully come together. And ending matters as we know, is in films as in diplomacy. And the final act is actually where credibility is earned and when promises are tested against delivery. The last days have made clear here that 4 years into implementation of the Doha Program of Action, the picture is mixed. We have heard many very positive examples over the last 2 days, but at the same time, LDCs continue to face deep structural challenges: poverty, constrained capacities, debt vulnerabilities, food insecurity, climate shocks, digital divide, you name it. And that is why the midterm review cannot be just a routine stock-taking exercise. It has to be a systematic moment where we ask honestly, where are we on track? Where are we falling behind? And what needs to be changed in the second half of the program? And in this regard, this discussion will focus on 3 very concrete questions. First, what does the data tell us at the midpoint of the DPOA? where are we seeing progress and where are the gaps becoming too visible to ignore? Second, how can partnerships become sharper and more predictable and more delivery focused so that commitments translate into support, into investment, and into results? And third, how can monitoring do more than only record progress? How can it help us to detect vulnerabilities early and guide action across the DPOA priorities? To help us answer these questions, we have this excellent panel with us that brings together not just the Secretariat's perspective on DPOA follow-up, the views of 2 national focal points, the viewpoint of one of the largest donors to the LDC, and insights of 2 organizations working close to development realities on the ground. So since we have only 45 minutes or even less now, I think it's less than 30, I would ask each panelist to keep his initial remarks to around 4 to 5 minutes so that we have enough time, or at least a little bit of time, for our exchange. Let me begin with our first panelist, Abdul Alim. He is the LDC team lead at OHRLS, and Alim is not only the person who holds together all the key strands on the LDC agenda in OHLS. In his role, he's also centrally involved in supporting the monitoring and follow-up of the Doha Program of Action. Alim is therefore ideally placed to set the stage for this discussion, to explain the monitoring framework, lay out the status of the preparations of the midterm review, and even when we are lucky, share first glimpses of what the international community should focus on as we move towards March 2027. So Alim, we're looking forward to your report. Take it away.
Thank you, Lars, and good afternoon, everyone. I am sure you are tired of serious discussions past 3 days, so let's enjoy some very light discussions for next 5 minutes. Doha Program of Action, I am sure all of you heard about that. Some of you might have seen, and a few, if not some, have also gone through it. So those who are familiar with the Doha Program of Action, this is widely known to be the most comprehensive global compact ever negotiated for the least developed countries. So during next 5 minutes, I'll focus on 3 key issues: how to track progress, and what has been achieved so far, and as we have reached the midpoint, what we are going to do now. So Doha Program of Action has 6 focus areas, you can see, and they are quite interconnected. And this is very much in line with closely aligned with the 2030 agenda. So in order to do some sort of a systematic follow-up and monitoring of the Doha Program of Action, we have developed a comprehensive monitoring and evaluation framework. The Doha Program of Action has 113 concrete targets negotiated and agreed by the member states. And corresponding to that, we have developed 165 indicators. And those are not like new. 72 of them are exactly identical or closely aligned with the SDG indicators. So this is just a snapshot how we have developed the evaluation and monitoring framework. You see the DPOA, you can see how does it correspond to the 2030 agenda, as well as which target corresponds to the SDG targets. So the follow-up and monitoring framework flows like starting from national level, then we go to regional level, then we bring to the global level, and then it goes to the General Assembly for some sort of a course correction. And 2 very strong negotiators sitting to my left and right, they are very strong, constructive, and very sympathetic champion of LDC issues in the General Assembly. I must recognize that, Tina and Lars. So this year we received like 27 national reports. We had a day-long conversations, very interesting conversations, that actually provides the evidence base for the follow-up process. And you will enjoy like one of the very beautiful presentation that we had at the National Focal Points meeting. Now let us see some of the progress, where we stand as we reach the midpoint. You see the GDP, the target was like 7%. It was like 3.9%. It's increasing slightly. Now it's nearly 5%, but there is a high risk that it may fall again. Primary education completion rate, the target is to reach universal. You see that only 66.5%. I'll go quickly. Very good progress in women's representation in parliaments. You see that there is quite upward trend. Also same in the like gender equality in the high school and primary school enrollment. Trade performance, you see the target was to double the export of LDCs, but it's still around 1%. There was some progress, but there is a high risk that next year it will again regress. Next is the global GDP. You can see that LDC's share is only 1.4% and the population is 14%. So there is a serious mismatch between the strength in geography, demography, and the strength in economy. And that was one of the fundamental objective of the Doha Program of Action, is to reduce this gap. But I think we need to see how it is moving forward. FDI only 2% again against 14% of the population, and it's not moving. Bilateral ODA, like the target was to reach 1.5 to 20. It was moving around 0.09%, but there was a massive fall in 2025, 25%, and perhaps that's the single largest yearly fall in the history of ODA. Quite alarming for LDCs. Food insecurity, still like moderate to severe food insecurity, nearly 58%. Then if you look at the internet connectivity, still like far from the universal access. Debt, like nearly 20 countries out of 44 are in debt distress or a high risk of it. And you know that LDCs are nearly spending one quarter of their revenue income or like export earning to service their debt, which could have been channeled to social safety net, health care facilities. Fragility and conflict, you know, it's a very strong nexus, like the lack of development fuels instability, and instability triggers like regress. So in order to reduce, in order to address that nexus, we are developing a UN system-wide operational guidelines for countries in conflict and post-conflict situation. There is a good news that 14 countries are in graduation pipeline. I mean, I should not only look at the bad news, but there are some good news. But it's not kind of a linear or kind of irreversible. Some countries made the graduation criteria and again decelerated. Very quickly, I'll walk you through the preparatory process. As I have said, national level, regional level, and global level. We are also doing thematic review. And a number of events have been planned. The most immediate one is coming in Africa from 8th to 10th of June. That will bring in all the African LDCs, development partners, UN entities. So in one page, like we'll distribute that. You don't have to, already many of you have seen. It has a series of events that is leading up to the Doha Program of Action. And my final point is how it's going to look like in Doha. It will bring like member states, UN entities, all development partners, private sector, civil society. And we'll have a number of events like plenary sessions, parallel roundtable, side events, national focal points meeting. I hope that given the current circumstances, midterm review will give a big opportunity to see where we stand, where we need to strengthen the actions, both from the LDC side as well as the development partner side. So with these few words, I would like to conclude here. And Kitos, thank you, and dhonobad to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alim, for this great overview that really sets the stage for what comes next. And next comes the national perspective. And I now want to turn to Chamu Chakele Yale, who will bring in the perspective of national implementation and present reflections on the DPOA review from a national perspective. And as you certainly know, the national focal points play a particularly important role in the DPOA follow-up. They are the bridge between the global review process and the national implementation, connecting the commitments made in New York and in Doha with national development strategies, financing realities, coordination challenges, and lived experience on the ground. So, Haptamu, from the perspective of a national focal point, what does the DPOA review look like when you see it from the national level, and what are Ethiopia's key messages that should be brought into the midterm review process? Please.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, moderator, and dear excellencies and dear delegates and participants. Good morning to all of you. I will just, I will present, the Ethiopian experience, especially focusing on the preparation process of this midterm review report, and also the progress so far we have achieved on 6 priority areas: policy coherence and coordinating mechanism of the implementation of this Doha program of action, challenges, also lesson learned from Ethiopian experience, and the way forward. So in the preparation process, actually this report the preparation process of this report was organized by Ministry of Planning and Development, and in collaboration with the government institution and international institutions. So first we have established also the technical working group composed from line ministries, key line ministries, UNDP, RCO, Addis Ababa University, and also WRI institution. So the technical working group first established this indicator framework, and it is approved. Then we have also applied, mixed analysis methods, and we have also collected data from different sources, administrative data, a survey, and also national reports, which is prepared by different line ministries, and also other international sources. So after just drafting the report, we have also sat together as the technical working group and reviewed the report, and finally it is enacted by the ministers. Institutional coordination, yeah, of course we have a long-term development plan. We call it the Path to Prosperity, and also we have also medium-term development and investment plan. So we have already integrated the 6 priority areas into our development plan, and this gives also for us to improve, the policy coherence and also coordination across different ministries. So when I come to the progress so far we have achieved, the first priority area is investing in people. So in this regard, in our 10-year development plan, human development is one of our priority, and many of the resource has been invested in the country in order to improve in education, health, outcome, and also in order to reduce poverty. So accordingly, in the last 3 or 5 years, expanded this what you call this productive safety net program in both areas, that is in rural and urban area. Beneficiaries has increased. It's almost 10 million beneficiaries is benefited from this program. CBHR, in order to just reduce the impact, the challenge of the burden of low-income society on health expenditure, the government has designed this the CBHI initiative, and this time around 63 million people are benefited from this. School feeding, of course, we have also have this initiative in order to increase the school attendance and also the school outcomes. We have this program. Currently, in every year, on average, more than 7 million students are benefited from this program. Maternal mortality and child health, of course. Maternal mortality and child health, we have improved, especially during 2020, it was about 412 mothers was died because of from 100 births, but now it is reduced to 141. Science and technology, of course, we are doing also on this in order to expand digital service and digital economy. Especially, the government has launched this 5 million coders initiative in order to build the capacity of youth and to prepare youth for the digital economy. Structural transformation, of course, this is also one of the priority area for us. The government has invested, industry to increase industry capacity, energy, digital infrastructure, connectivity, and regional integration. This also lies. This is also lies a building block for a modern integrated economy in the country. Trade and regional integration. We have a lot of progress on this area. And also climate change resilience. You know that Ethiopia was already launched, and before 5-7 years, this about green legacy. And because of this green legacy initiatives, the forest coverage at this time, it increases from 50% to 23.6% as the country. So and also our modern energy, almost 97% of our modern energy comes from renewable energy. This is a remarkable achievement at the country level when it comes to this priority area. Partnership and financing, domestic resource mobilization is our priority and has better improvement, of course, especially on domestic mobilization, especially on tax. But still, it has also, when you see the efficiency, that is tax to GDP ratio still is not as we planned. So we have to work also on that. Best practice, we have a lot of best practice. Community-based health insurance, homegrown school feeding, national with self-sufficient initiative, community mobilization under education for generation, MOSAB, in order to increase this, the governance and also government public service. Government community partnership financing approach is also one of the can be taken as a best experience. Challenges, of course, we have recorded remarkable achievement, but we are facing also we are passing with different challenges. For example, financial constraint and declining ODA flow, climate shock and environmental vulnerability, youth unemployment, skill gap, limited industrial competitive and export diversification, data gap and limitation, infrastructure and technology adoption is also the challenges. We can learn from Ethiopian experience. We have strong national ownership, integrated planning, improved policy coherence and coordination mechanism, community participation, strengthens sustainability, as well as it is also enhanced, the local ownership at the country level. Digital transformation partnership are also essential in order to scale up, in the country. So recommendation, just half minute.
In one sentence.
Yes, yeah. We have to, even if we have improvement on resource mobilization, we have to strengthen the still. Expanding digital transformation and innovation is very important. Investing in human capital and job creation is also important. Enhance climate resilience and disaster preparedness, a statistical system, improving statistical system. Of course, we have a program, we call it this statistical development program. So this program is very important and it is under implementation, strengthening private sector participation in industrialization, expansion of industrialization also is very, very important for the country in order to realize, the priority areas with that given framework.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Habtamu. There was one sentence with a lot of commas and many semicolons. Thank you very much. This was a great example how to adapt the Doha Program of Action on the ground. Sorry for rushing you through this, but with that 20 minutes left, so maybe I get out 7 more from the organizers. We can give the floor to our other colleagues here on the panel. And let's stay with the national perspective and turn over to another, or our second national focal point, Itmane Musa Ali, who is the special advisor to the minister in Djibouti's Ministry of Economy and Finance. And Itmane also attended Monday's national focal point meeting and will give us an overall report over the meeting last Monday. Thank you very much, Itmane.
Okay, thank you for giving me the floor. As Mr. Alim said, a few days ago we had our annual LDCs focal points meeting. So I will try to summarize the points that were discussed and the key outcome of our session. But in order to be a little bit quicker and to maximize my time, I will speak in French. So I'll invite you to put your headphones. Okay. Je pense qu'on peut commencer. Alors, la bonne nouvelle, c'est que tous les points focaux qui étaient présents ont partagé un peu les progrès qu'ils ont faits, ainsi que les différents résultats. Et il a été vu que chaque pays avait intégré les 6 priorités, les 6 piliers plutôt, du TPOA comme partie intégrante de leur cadre stratégique, que ce soit leur plan national de développement, d'autres cadres ou même l'INFF. Tout le processus a été un processus multi-acteurs. Il y a eu des ambitions et aussi des enjeux communs, malgré la différence de contexte, mais également de zones géographiques. Alors, parmi les enjeux, on va dire communs, il y avait le manque de diversification. Donc, il y avait comme une tendance, une sorte de tendance commune où il y avait une faible diversification de l'économie. Et ça a été le cas, par exemple, pour mon pays, Djibouti. Ça a été le cas, par exemple, pour la Guinée-Bissau, pour le Cambodge, mais également pour le Lesotho, comme vous pouvez le voir sur la diapo. Alors, en ce qui concerne le capital humain, le capital humain demeure quand même un obstacle assez important. D'ailleurs, certains pays où il y a un faible indice du capital humain, comme à Madagascar, où on enregistre 0,39. C'est aussi des pays qui sont majoritairement jeunes. Comme par exemple à Djibouti, il y a 64,3% de la population qui a moins de 30 ans. Et il faudrait justement transformer ce potentiel. Il faudrait transformer ce potentiel en atout quand même démographique, parce que c'est un véritable atout. Il y a quelques enjeux. Si je prends l'exemple de la Guinée, où 37% de la jeunesse sont nets, donc ils ne suivent pas de formation particulière. ils ne vont pas à l'école, ils n'ont pas d'emploi non plus. Donc, c'est une situation qui est aggravée par le décalage aussi entre les programmes scolaires, l'éducation et les besoins du marché. Ensuite, il y a aussi le climat. Donc, en ce qui concerne le climat, il a été noté que la vulnérabilité n'est pas seulement, c'est pas une question secondaire au PMA, mais elle est devenue une contrainte structurelle au développement, affectant la sécurité alimentaire, les infrastructures, les finances publiques. Et d'ailleurs, cela engendre aussi une perte pour certains pays, comme le Cambodge, où il y a 5% quand même, une perte de 5% au niveau du PIB du pays. Ensuite, alors, pour parler, il y a aussi un déficit financier. Donc, les PMA font face à une sorte de double pression, si je peux dire ça comme ça. D'un côté, il y a les diminutions des flux de l'APD, et de l'autre côté, il y a l'augmentation de services de dette. Il y a également l'inflation. Donc, un cas frappant, c'est celui de la République populaire du Laos, où, j'espère que je dis bien le nom du pays, mais où les vulnérabilités liées à la dette sont aggravées par le taux d'inflation massif, équivalent à 88% de leur PIB. Il y a aussi le Cambodge et le Togo qui ont souligné un déficit critique de financement pour les infrastructures vertes, notamment. Ils insistent aussi sur le fait qu'il est important de renforcer la résilience en corrigeant les faiblesses structurelles dans la mobilisation des ressources domestiques. En ce qui concerne la graduation, il y a une véritable appréhension pour certains liée à cette graduation. Je peux prendre en exemple l'expérience du Sénégal qui a été partagée, qui, eux, vont graduer. Mais il y a comme une sorte d'appréhension où il y aurait peut-être des pertes de certains avantages. Je vais aller un peu plus vite, de certains avantages, comme des sortes de dons, qui pourraient se transformer en prêts concessionnels qui s'ajouteraient aux défis de financement dont j'avais parlé un peu plus tôt. Donc c'est important d'avoir une transition, de mettre des mécanismes de transition doux et adaptés à chaque contexte. Ensuite, alors il y avait aussi des contraintes, mais spécifiques aussi à certains pays. Il y avait premièrement les conflits, la fragilité, la sécurité. Certains pays ont souligné le fait que, donc si je prends l'exemple de la RDC, du Mali ou encore du Burkina Faso, le besoin urgence de réponse humanitaire qui détourne systématiquement les rares ressources qu'ils disposent, des investissements de développement à long terme, ce qui est assez problématique parce que cette contrainte spécifique au contexte affaiblit les institutions nationales, érode les acquis de développement durement obtenus. Et ensuite, il y a aussi la vulnérabilité géopolitique. Il y a certains pays qui sont enclavés, isolés aussi, et qui font face à des enjeux propres à eux que certains pays n'expérimenteraient pas. Donc c'est le cas de Kiribati. Il y a aussi des barrières institutionnelles de coordination. Donc le fait qu'il y a un travail qui peut être fait en silo. Il y a un manque de synergie intersectorielle, qui peut bloquer l'action intégrée. Il y en a aussi certains qui ont parlé de tout ce qui est MNI. Je vais aller vite, je vais quand même terminer vite fait. Oui, alors les best practices, je ne veux pas vraiment revenir dessus parce que déjà, Éthiopie, vu qu'il n'y a pas beaucoup de temps, Éthiopie, on a parlé, mais vous pouvez lire très rapidement. Donc voilà, on va passer parce que je suis censée avoir fini très rapidement. Les priorités. Premièrement, il faut institutionnaliser les mécanismes de transition progressive, dont je parlais plus tôt avec le Sénégal. Deuxièmement, il faut accélérer la digitalisation inclusive. Ensuite, aligner les compétences des jeunes aux besoins du marché, ce dont je parlais un peu plus tôt. Aligner les compétences des jeunes, oui, ça je l'ai dit. Nous devons renforcer les capacités statistiques et prendre exemple sur les pays qui ont réussi, parce qu'il y a certains PMA qui ont réussi sur ce point-là. J'ai pas eu le temps de le mentionner, mais Madagascar en faisait partie. Et évidemment, enfin, nous devons fournir un soutien adapté aux PMA qui accusent un retard, et nous avons besoin d'une assistance ciblée, spécifique à chaque pays, afin de permettre à ces nations de surmonter leur blocage structurel unique et d'atteindre enfin le seuil de la graduation. Merci. J'essaie d'aller vite, mais...
Thank you very much, and I feel so bad looking so requesting over to you, and so helpless, I would have said almost. Thank you very much for this presentation and for really showcasing the bottlenecks that exist in program countries on the ground and in development realities. But now let's flip the perspective, and I want to bring in the partnerships dimension, and I'm very pleased to turn over to Tina Satuli, who is the Deputy Head of Sustainable Development and Partnerships at the delegation of the European Union to the UN. And Tina has coordinated this LDC portfolio for the 27 EU member states for the last 5 years, I guess. So you can expect her to know every line of every LDC resolution. And she can also speak to the partnerships role of the UN Commission and the Director General for International Partnerships. So Tina, the DPA is ambitious. We've heard that from Alim, but also from our colleagues. And delivery cannot depend solely on national action. It will also require credible, predictable, and coordinated partnerships that are closely aligned with LDC priorities. What would it take to make partnerships for the DPOA more strategic and more directly linked to implementation? Please, you have the floor, Tina.
Thank you so much, Lars, and thank you to the previous speakers for their very interesting presentations. And I was kind of nodding along, as in, indeed, this is the flip side of what the European Union is trying to do to accompany the LDCs on their journey on the implementation of the DPOA and their path towards sustainable development. Maybe I'll start just saying a few words about the EU as a partner for LDCs. And so many of you may know that the EU is one of the longest-standing, staunchest supporters of the LDCs, and was there at the beginning of the creation of the category, and has supported this politically and financially and in every way possible since its inception. So there's a strong historical connection between EU and LDCs. From an EU perspective, countries are not just LDCs or LLDCs or SIDS or developing countries, they are partners. And each partner is treated with that individualized approach, tailor-made approach from the EU side. But that said, we also have this layer, very strong layer of LDC partnership. In 2022, the EU Council adopted a new strategy, kind of reinvigorating this approach, and it was very much linked to the adoption of the Doha Program of Action, but also to the new context that we live in, and the EU's new approach to partnerships. So if you look at EU policies across the board, whether it's trade, official development assistance, or climate action, there's a strong emphasis on accompanying LDCs, and it's our policy, but it's also our practice. Linking that to the EU's generalized approach to partnerships, which is, in a nutshell, is to create sustainable and mutually beneficial partnerships. And you might ask, what is the mutually beneficial partnership aspect in the relation to LDCs? And I would recall what President Stubb said yesterday about, the EU is a big actor, but we do consider that we're kind of in the middle, in the sense that we're not part of this very polarized world that we're observing now that is very transactional. We are still very much have benefited from multilateralism and are very much still the friends of multilateralism. And I think that's a space that we think and expect and hope that the LDCs also recognize themselves as that a strong multilateral system and collaboration on global challenges is a space where we meet on a kind of level playing field in the sense that we are truly partners. On the EU's approach to partnerships, and maybe now to address your question a bit, how do we make this partnership one that delivers on the DPOA? And from an EU perspective, our partnership approach is that the partnership should deliver a fairer, more resilient world. We have the SDGs at the center of it, and our star product these days is the Global Gateway, and this is a way that we're taking our partnerships forward really with implementation first. Now, what is the Global Gateway? I hope this is something that you've all heard of before, and this is I'm bringing it up in a kind of forward-looking perspective, as in how can we make this work for the LDCs in a real way. So the Global Gateway is about is a investment leverage package. Its aim is to leverage about 400 billion in investment in our partner countries with a 360 approach. Now, what does that mean? It means that the focus is on smart, clean, secure infrastructure. So looking at some of the elements that I've seen in the previous presentations, looking at digital, transport, energy, kind of the hard infrastructure part, but also about the human capacity aspect. So education, health, research, youth, and so forth. And our approach is one of really focusing on the implementation by combining the forces in a first instance within Europe. So we have 27 member states and EU institutions, the European Investment Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, is that we work together on big projects, on big kind of portfolios to ensure that there's as little duplication, as little waste of resources as possible. And I mean, I think there's a lot of flagship projects already ongoing, but how do we really leverage this to implement the DPOA? That is the question, and it's one that I'm going to leave hanging a bit, in that we need your thoughts and ideas of how the Global Gateway projects, taking into account the 360 approach, how can that be really harnessed to leverage development gains in LDCs? I have a lot more notes here, but I think in the interest of time, I'm going to wrap up here and just thank everyone who's taken part in this 3 days. It's been very, very interesting to hear all the discussions and the contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tina, for the input, but also for keeping it that concise and precise. Thank you very much. Without further ado, I have a big clock here staring at me and frightening me, so I will speed up and introduce right away the monitoring side. And I would like to turn to monitoring itself, as I introduced, not as an reporting obligation, but maybe as a tool to understand vulnerabilities, to identify gaps, and to guide action. So we have Mathieu Bouchard here, who is program manager at the Foundation for Studies and Research on International Development, short FERDI. And Mathieu, my question for you would be, as monitoring is often perceived as this reporting exercise, how can DPOA monitoring become more policy relevant, and maybe more specifically, are current monitoring tools sufficiently able to capture vulnerability? C'est à vous.
Thank you, Lars. And there is translation, so I will speak in French, so I invite you to take your headset. And thank you for your comprehension. D'abord, je voudrais remercier l'OHRLS, les organisateurs, pour l'excellente tenue des débats depuis 3 jours. Et c'est un plaisir pour la FERDI et pour moi-même de participer aux différents forums depuis le début de ce processus. Je vous remercie de votre question. Le programme d'action de Doha, on peut dire qu'il identifie très clairement les défis auxquels font face les PMA, que ce soit en matière de vulnérabilité dans toutes ses dimensions, l'exposition aux différents chocs climatiques, mais autres, et ils ont été rappelés successivement. Et les crises récentes, je crois, protéiformes, multiples, ont confirmé la pertinence du diagnostic. Je crois que la question maintenant est de savoir comment les mécanismes de suivi peuvent dépasser ce diagnostic. Alors j'ai 2 messages. Le premier, c'est que je pense que, dans un temps très très court évidemment, les mécanismes de suivi mesurent donc très bien les progrès moyens, mais il s'agirait de bien évaluer également la soutenabilité et la résilience de ces progrès. Autrement dit, il serait intéressant de s'interroger particulièrement sur comment mieux mesurer la fragilité des trajectoires de développement et comment mieux évaluer la capacité réelle des PMA à faire face aux futures crises. Vous l'avez montré, les statistiques l'ont montré, un pays peut connaître une forte croissance, mais avoir et conserver un fort degré de vulnérabilité, que ce soit à quelques produits d'exportation, aux chocs climatiques, aux fluctuations financières, et j'en passe. Et les exemples de pays dans ces cas-là sont très nombreux. On pense au Bangladesh, l'Éthiopie, le Rwanda, mais beaucoup de pays rentrent dans ce contexte et ces situations. C'est ce que l'on montre notamment dans plusieurs travaux de la FERDI qui poussent pour une meilleure intégration de la vulnérabilité structurelle dans la définition des politiques publiques de développement, en complément avec les travaux de nos partenaires et amis de WIDER et du Centre de développement de l'OCDE. Le défi aujourd'hui est peut-être davantage donc de mieux articuler tous ces défis dans les mécanismes de suivi et de mieux mesurer la fragilité des trajectoires. L'enjeu donc n'est pas seulement de mesurer les résultats atteints, mais aussi la capacité des pays à préserver ses acquis face aux crises futures. Et je souligne aussi que la FERDI a mis en place un observatoire des vulnérabilités pour justement mieux suivre tous ces aspects essentiels de la durabilité du développement. Le deuxième point, c'est que le suivi du programme d'action de Doha gagnerait aussi à davantage peut-être évaluer l'adéquation entre le soutien international aux PMA et la vulnérabilité des PMA. Parce que, rappelons-le, évidemment, c'est une évidence, mais si le programme d'action a été adopté par tous les PMA, il l'a été aussi par tous ses partenaires qui sont engagés fortement dans cette affaire. Et je vous dis ça dans un contexte que vous connaissez tous, évidemment, d'une forte réduction des ressources concessionnelles, qui étaient déjà très rares et insuffisantes, et qui risquent de continuer à diminuer, en tout cas qui ne risquent pas malheureusement d'augmenter dans les prochaines années. En parallèle de cela, la multiplication des défis du développement, il y a aussi le financement des biens publics mondiaux qui sont aussi consommateurs de ce genre de ressources très rares. Et donc la question du niveau des ressources, mais aussi de leur allocation et de leur bonne allocation, est d'autant plus prégnante aujourd'hui qu'elle ne l'était déjà auparavant. Et donc je voudrais souligner que cette question, et il nous reste 1 minute, merci Rita, bien sûr, cette question, elle est bien dans les débats internationaux, malgré le contexte que je viens de décrire. J'en veux pour preuve notamment le dernier communiqué des ministres du développement des pays du G7 qui s'est réuni il y a quelques semaines en France et qui souligne précisément et qui invite les partenaires des PMA à allouer leur aide prioritairement au regard des critères des PMA. Les PMA sont cités dans ce truc. Je dois dire que la FERDI a quand même beaucoup milité pour ce genre de mention. À la FERDI, nous essayons de travailler justement beaucoup sur voir si les ressources concessionnelles bénéficient véritablement aux pays les plus pauvres et les plus vulnérables. Et nous sommes en train de finaliser une analyse sur la sélectivité justement des ressources concessionnelles des bailleurs et aussi sur des travaux sur comment mieux intégrer la vulnérabilité dans les modèles d'allocation. Nous venons de finaliser une grosse étude pour la Banque interaméricaine de développement qui justement a cet objectif-là. Et pour conclure, je dirais donc que le programme d'action de Doha est déjà largement identifié les bons enjeux. Et maintenant, le principal défi, c'est du suivi. Ce n'est pas simplement de mesurer les progrès, mais c'est de mieux comprendre pourquoi certains progrès restent très fragiles face à des vulnérabilités qui, elles, sont persistantes. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Mathieu. And thank you very much for this also very, very concise presentation. I can imagine that it's even harder for someone who comes from a research background to present that way. So let me finally turn over, and I'm pleased to welcome Miniva Shibuye, head of LDCs, LDCs, and SIDS at the International Telecommunication Union. And Miniva, my question, I will keep it very short and not introduce you further. I'm sorry for this. From ITU's perspective, how can the UN system strengthen coordinated support to LDCs? I know it's difficult to speak as a representative of only one organization and within RC here in the room, particularly on ITU's focus on digital connectivity, innovation, skills, and capacity development. And maybe if I also can ask, where are the most urgent digital gaps today? Is it infrastructure, affordability, skills, meaningful use, or all of that? So please take it away, Miniva.
Thank you so much. I'll just say all of them. And yes, I think we'll revert to the RC, and I think she did speak this morning a bit to the issue. So, but to your question, I think it's very important that when supporting countries, this is done in a very coordinated way, and that partnerships, it's important, it has to be partnership driven, and more importantly, we need to focus on impact. And this is one issue that ITU really emphasizes on. But going back to your second question on specific issues that are related to ITU's mandate, Alim did talk a little bit about the ICT targets, but what's interesting is that it's in the DPOA, it's very specific. It's, I was looking last night and reminding myself that actually the international community was very ambitious on this target. It's and very specific also. So by 2025, like midterm, where do we want to be? And at the end of the DPOA implementation period, so very, very precise. 35% by now, we should have that, and 70% by the end of the implementation period. And where we are now is what Alim showed, and I'm showing it again, just to say that we slightly missed the target by almost 2 percentage points, so almost there, but not quite. But I have to say that between now and 2031, that this is really a big question mark, because it's also doubling where we are now, or where we are supposed to be now, to 2031. So this is a big question mark, and it's what are we supposed to do as the international community? And it's going back to the issue of partnership. And again here, just to highlight one initiative about a multi-partnership digital coalition that the ITU has been implementing, and this is just an example of how we can work together. So not just about the United Nations, we can co-convene this, but it's also the private sector, the regulators, member states, both from the donor side as well as the LDCs. So this is some of you may already have seen this, and we've been talking about this since actually. In Doha, we did, this coalition actually was just launched a day before the General Assembly adopted the Doha Program of Action. And here we are. It's 29.6 billion, so almost 30 billion that has been pledged towards advancing digital connectivity in the LDCs. This is very specific to the LDCs. If you go to this website, you can see how the various LDCs can benefit from this, but also if you feel there's an area that is not being targeted, please feel free and make a pledge. Or those LDCs where you think that there is an area that requires further improvement, please come to us and let us know, and we'll see whether we can find partners. But one thing that we're doing is also matchmaking, because there are some LDCs that, for instance, are not coming forward and saying, oh, we did see this pledge, but how can we benefit from this pledge? So we are trying to see whether we can matchmake the pledge makers to the LDCs. So one thing that I wanted to end with is, as we are thinking towards 2031, because we are obviously slightly off target, but I think it's going to be very difficult to get to where we're supposed to. One thing that the ITU does is this broadband infrastructure mapping. I was just speaking to a colleague that works on this issue, because we were talking to the ambassadors from the South Pacific. And once you see this map, it looks very good, but then you have to, when you narrow down more specifically where most of the LDCs are, especially if you look at the Sahel region, you see that it's not as dark as the other regions. So we want to be able to connect everybody, but it's also, if we go to the question that you raised last, whether it's about infrastructure, but it's also digital connectivity, not just accessibility, but as well as skilling and so on and so forth. So the last point I would like to, just narrowing down on the South Pacific, where some of the LDCs are, you will see that to some of these countries, unfortunately, there isn't really, you don't see any line that goes towards there. I mean, there are other options such as satellite connectivity, but it's important that broadband infrastructure connectivity is everywhere, because that really, truly is what's going to lead to meaningful digital and impactful digital transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miniva. I didn't even see a time warning, so thank you very much.
I think I got a 1 minute, but I didn't want Richard to come to me with end now. So.
No, thank you very much to all the panelists, and thank you very much for and apologies actually for rushing through this topic. I'm certain that there's so much more we could talk about, but we have the lunch break or the lunch afterwards, where you can certainly catch up with one or the other of the panelists to dive deeper into the topic. So let me close by just returning to my awkward movie image from the beginning. So if the DPOA were a movie, the midterm review coming up would not be the end credits. And it, from what we just learned, it would certainly not be the moment when people leave quietly the cinema. It can be a turning point, the moment when the story can still come together, when the main characters get the support they need, and when promises made earlier can lead into a convincing end. And I mean, we left so many cliffhangers here on this panel that there is certainly a lot to catch up. So thank you very much again for your attention, for your participation, and we should conclude with a big round of applause for the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lars and the panelists. We'll now proceed to the concluding segment of the Future Forum. And I would like to invite Mr. Roland Mollerus, the director of OHRLLS, to deliver his concluding remarks.
Good afternoon to you all, and thank you very much to the MC there for that introduction. And I very much liked the previous session and how it closed with the movie by Lars, a very good one. And with that, excellencies and dear delegates, distinguished delegates, colleagues, as we conclude the third and final day of the fourth UN LDC Future Forum, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to all of you, all the participants, speakers, moderators, and partners, for the very rich discussions, practical insights, and forward-looking recommendations shared throughout the past days in this forum. Over the past 3 days, one message has clearly emerged. Investing in people, particularly young people, is indispensable for the structural transformation and sustainable development of the least developed countries. Our discussions highlighted the urgency of equipping young people with the skills, tools, and opportunities needed to thrive in a rapidly evolving economy and labor market. Education systems must become more adaptive, inclusive, and future-oriented, with stronger linkages between education, technical and vocational training, digital learning, and employment creation. We also underscored the transformative potential of digitalization and innovation. Digital technologies, online learning platforms such as the online university dedicated to LDCs, innovation ecosystems, and youth entrepreneurship can serve as powerful accelerators of development, provided that access gaps, infrastructure constraints, and inequalities are effectively addressed. At the same time, transformation cannot be inclusive without deliberate efforts to reach women, marginalized groups, rural populations, and young people in vulnerable situations. Inclusive growth, gender equality, and digital inclusion must remain at the center of efforts to implement the Doha Program of Action. Participants also emphasized the importance of research, evidence-based policymaking, and strengthened partnerships. Bridging the gap between research, policy, and implementation will be critical to translating innovative ideas into tangible, scalable impacts. The discussions on technical and vocational education and training, digital skills, and future labor markets further highlighted the need to align investments in human capital with evolving economic realities. Importantly, many of the insights from this forum are directly relevant to the upcoming comprehensive high-level midterm review of the Doha Program of Action, and as we have mentioned several times, to be convened in Doha, Qatar in March 2027. This midterm review will be a critical opportunity to assess progress, identify persistent gaps and emerging challenges, and strengthen collective action in support of the least developed countries. As we move forward this milestone, several priorities clearly emerge. And let me mention 4 of them. First, accelerating implementation across all priority areas of the Doha Program of Action is essential. Secondly, strengthening international support measures and global partnerships. Third, scaling up investments in youth, education, skills, technology, and productive capacities. And last and fourth, ensuring that the voices and priorities of LDCs remain at the center of the process. Allow me to express sincere appreciation to the government of Finland for hosting this important forum, and also to our partners, including the governments of Qatar and Turkey, for their continued support. I also extend my sincere gratitude to all speakers, all moderators, youth representatives, researchers, and our co-organizers, UNU Wider and the OECD Development Center, for their valuable contributions and partnerships in making this forum a great success. Last, but certainly not least, I would like to express my deep appreciation to all support staff, interpreters, the team from Johnsy, and my own team and the Finnish colleagues for their professionalism, dedication, and excellent support throughout the forum. Their hard work behind the scenes was instrumental in ensuring that the smooth organization and successful delivery of this very important event. We in UN OHRLS remain fully committed to supporting the LDCs in advancing the implementation of the DPOA and in preparing for a successful and action-oriented midterm review. While this forum is coming to a close, the discussions and partnerships initiated here must continue. The ideas shared over the past days should guide future cooperation and collective action. Following this forum, the preparatory process towards the midterm review will continue to gather momentum. The Asia-Pacific Regional Review has already taken place in Phnom Penh from 31st March to the 1st of April this year, while the African Regional Review will be held in Addis Ababa from the 8th to the 10th of June the coming month. These will be followed by a dedicated LDC session during the high-level political forum in July, and a joint General Assembly ECOSOC event later on. Their outcomes will feed into the intergovernmental process, including the political declaration expected in November 2026 and the expert preparatory meeting in early 2027, culminating in the high-level midterm review in March 2027. We count on your continued engagement throughout this process. Dear participants, excellencies, distinguished delegates, the Doha Program of Action ushered in a renewed era of hope for more than 1.1 billion people across the world's least developed countries. The midterm review must therefore be more than an assessment. It must be a decisive opportunity to accelerate implementation, close gaps, and deliver tangible improvements in people's lives. Let us seize this moment to renew political commitment, strengthen partnerships, and mobilize the resources needed to support the world's most vulnerable countries in achieving sustainable and resilient development. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roland Mullerus. I would like to invite Professor Patricia Justino, Director of UNU WIDER, to deliver her concluding remarks.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will be very brief. Just to say, it's been a real pleasure to engage with all of you over the last 3 days. UNU WIDER welcomes this collaboration with OHRLLS, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, and the OECD Development Center. And we are really pleased to be again here at one of the conference here in Helsinki. It's a pleasure to offer some reflections about this day, and I will do so from a research perspective. That's what UNU WIDER brings to the table, and that's our mandate. So bear with me. I know lunch is late, but just a few words. So the forum has focused on a central promise of the Doha Program of Action that the transformation in LDCs must begin with people. And that's absolutely correct. But as we also heard across the various panels, we cannot separate the investment in people from investments elsewhere, including the overall economic and political ecosystem that surrounds these implementations and these processes. So 3 takeaways from our perspective, which very much resonate with the work that UNU WIDER is being conducting in supporting our partnerships in a number of LDCs. The first is we've just heard about the upcoming midterm review for the Doha Program of Action. And that at that moment should be a moment of evidence, not just about reporting. And it's important to distinguish the two. The Doha Program of Action is highly ambitious, but what ambition only becomes policy when we actually know what's working, what is not working, for whom and why. And I think there's still work to be done on the why part. The key question is not simply whether programs exist and whether aggregate estimators are moving, but also whether they are actually changing opportunities for everyone, including young people, as we've discussed during this conference. So it's important that we continue to invest more in data and evidence about what works, but also about what doesn't work and who benefits and who loses, because some will in these processes. The second takeaway is about the types of investment that we putting forward in young people. And of course, investment in education and human capital must indeed remain at the center of all economic interventions. And this should continue to remain exactly right, but it's not, what we should be careful is not that this is not just adding a social sector perspective to growth policy. It is the foundation of growth policy, and we must understand that. No country, LDCs or otherwise, can diversify production, attract investments, raise productivities, or manage technological change without educated, healthy, and skilled people. And we just had a discussion about TVET this morning, which is particularly central here. But LDCs, and any other countries, need education systems that not only deliver these programs, but also connect those that go through these programs with real opportunities, fundamentally in labor markets. And we should be very careful about not just limiting our discussions to the supply side of the skills problem, of education problem, but also we need to ask the hard questions about the returns to these programs. The returns to education, the returns to TVET, where are they? What is being done elsewhere? In my own area of research in conflict-affected countries, we estimate that the returns to education are 0 on average. And in some cases, they can be negative for a variety of reasons. So we need to ask those hard questions. Young people need skills, but they need economies and opportunities and ways of living a dignified life. So human capital investments are very important. Focus on people is very important, but we cannot forget that we also need the economic transformation and opportunities available. And finally, all we talk about, implementations, although these variable policies depend on trust. On how young people will trust our systems going forward. This is not often discussed. It's a very intangible concept. But for instance, research that we've done at UNUI that shows that currently a quarter of the world population has no trust whatsoever in their governments, which is something that should provide a red flag for all of us. And the situation, not only is for the current case, the situation has been getting worse generation by generation. And the current generation shows the least amount of trust in institutions and governments. So this matters for the success of the Doha Program of Action, because if citizens do not trust institutions, reforms are very hard to implement. So this is an area that we did not discuss very much, but those are questions that the mid-review should be asking. Are we measuring the right things? Are we investing enough in the environments that allow young people to thrive? And are we doing enough to build trust in institutions, including from local to national to the multilateral system? And this is extremely important to ensure that in this era of enormous economic and political uncertainty, we ensure that the most vulnerable are not left behind, as it currently is the case. So that's our that is what the main takeaways from this meeting for me and for us is there are very important areas to take in consideration as we implement these programs. And what's important is to ask the right questions, the whys. So I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Justino. I now invite Ms. Annalisa Primi, Head of Economic Transformation and Development Division, OECD Development Center.
Hi. Thanks. I know I'm the barrier with lunch, but I've learned a lot, and so I want to share with you. a bit of what I learned. First, let me say that it's a great pleasure to be here. We support this LDC Future Forum. It's a pleasure to collaborate with OHRLLS on this, to collaborate with UNU wider. And let me really thank Finland for creating the opportunity for this recurrent space. I think when you do one event, it could be great, but there is nothing as a sequence of possibility to actually keep a conversation and impact happening. To close, I just have 3 things that I want to share with you. It's impossible to summarize. This has been extremely rich 3 days, but I have 3 takeaways that I hope can be useful for all of you in terms of designing the policies and mobilizing the partnerships that are needed for LDC development. They're all on the negative side. They're all on the not, and I realized this when I was preparing it. So first, development is not a destiny. You know, development can be shaped. It doesn't matter what natural resources or natural constraints or vulnerabilities you have. There is an opportunity to change the pathway. I mean, the Finland and the Finnish experience is a beautiful and very well-studied stories in this respect. And actually, development is shaped through policies, and there are 2 main ingredients. One is the visions and the aspiration, and this is matched by consistent investments in 2 things, in peoples and institutions, and in creating the conditions for learning and innovation. So my dear industrial policy is part of it, but it's actually bigger because it's really the focus on the people and institutions and creating the incentives for learning and innovation. My second takeaway is equity is not a cost. We can't contabilize and do our budgets considering equity as a cost. This has been a consistent message across all the interventions, and Patricia made it very clear in her point as well. Equity is part of an economic development strategy, and it is an investment for better futures. This means that we need to design systems, whatever system it is, to reduce gaps. And when we translate it into the education area, this means designing systems that take into account the existence of the gaps up front. So thinking of the rural issues, thinking of girls, we were discussing about the conditions, what kind of social norms make it more difficult for girls to enter into the schools. This cannot be afterthoughts. It's thinking about the vulnerable learners. And it is also thinking about the teachers, you know, schools. I'm a daughter of 2 generations of teachers in public schools in Italy. So I grew up in an environment where you say the school, it's not the building. The school is not the books and the program. The school is the teacher. What changes a student life is the teacher that you meet. It's enough one great teacher. This changes the opportunity. Ask around in your life or the people that you know. Everybody will tell you there was this person and this is how I discovered. So the investment in the teachers is extremely important. And I think this was very nice in the keynote of Melvin in the first day when you were saying we can design systems to actually deliver on equity. And we know that we have demonstrated it with all numbers possible. When education reaches everybody and it's inclusive, the growth and development opportunities amplifies. I think this is what was part of what the Finnish experience was sharing with all of us. My third takeaway is that skills development is not just an education policy. And here I fully concur with Patricia's point. Skills development, for me, it's a key component of a national development strategy. And this is where the issue of the priorities for development come in. Diversification, resilience, food security, environmental sustainability. The education system must be conceived in a way that is capable to deliver and amplify these economic opportunities. On this, I have a slightly different view, probably from the majority. I heard a lot of, we need to train people to be sure they can work in the companies that exist today. We need to prepare them for the future. I think most of the big companies can afford to give the specific training to the people that they're hiring. What I think the education systems should do is to create the competencies that enable people to learn. that they can, the very specific business needs, they will learn them on the job. But the capacity to adapt, the capacity to learn, and the capacity to innovate, to create, there are a lot of opportunities. There was some discussion on startups and innovation ecosystems. To do that, you need to have some technical knowledge. So this is what the education system should deliver. So these were my three takeaways. I think that it has been very important to discuss this, because actually when we talk about education in least developed countries, we are not talking about another gap that we need to close. We looked at a lot of data and its gaps and targets, but I feel that here we're talking about a platform that if we do it right on education, then we can actually enable the sustainable development and the sustainable economic transformation that LDCs aspire to. I think this is important, because when we look at goals and targets, it looks like they're outside. But you know, I work with least developed countries from the Development Center. We implement production transformation policy review. We support them in their national development strategy. And all of you, you spoke in these days, you have national visions, you have aspiration, you do have your own strategies. So it's just not a target to meet because we need to close a gap. It's actually an investment that it's needed and then requires international solidarity and support as much as it requires domestic resource mobilization to actually enable, achieve the future that each and every one of the countries want. And this, for me, is what I take away from this. I thank you for the opportunity for learning, and I look forward to go together to the Doha midterm review with some concrete results that we can build together. And of course, I look forward to a next edition of this Future Forum. Thank you.
With those final remarks, we conclude the 4th edition of the LDC Future Forum. I would like to thank you all for your active participation, valuable contributions, and your continued commitment to advancing the aspirations of LDCs. We wish you safe travel and look forward to continued collaboration. Maybe just final announcement. Lunch is served, and also in case you want photos, the photographer has kindly accepted to take photos. Thank you.